The cold came first, sharp enough to cut through the worn denim of James Mitchell's jacket before the wind even bothered to follow. 56 years on this earth had taught him to read weather, like some men read stock tickers. And tonight, the mountains were telling a story he didn't particularly want to hear. He'd driven 3 hours from his cabin outside Bozeman for this monthly ritual dinner with the closest thing to family he had left, and now the sky was threatening to make the return trip a nightmare. The Crossroads Inn sat exactly where Montana pretended it might become Wyoming, a squat building of weathered timber and stone that had served travelers since before James was born.
We must protect the innocent at all
costs. Route
costs.
89 stretched in both directions like a promise someone forgot to keep empty tonight, except for his truck and the gravel lot and the scatter of vehicles that suggested the dinner crowd was light. Thursday nights usually were. He preferred it that way. Fewer people meant less noise, less pretense, less of the hollow, small talk that made retirement feel like a punishment instead of a reward. James pushed through the heavy door into warmth and the smell of frying onions, his eyes adjusting to the dim interior, while his mind cataloged exits and sightlines without conscious thought. 24 years in Special Forces didn't leave a man when he turned in his papers. The habit stayed baked into muscle memory, an instinct useful even when there was nothing left to protect except his own obsolescence. 3 tables occupied 4, counting his usual spot in the corner. Old Frank hunched over coffee at the bar, his trucker's cap stained with years of highway dust. Billy from the ranch 5 miles south picking at a burger, his movements slow with the exhaustion that came from honest work. A young couple near the window tourist, probably their matching fleece jackets, too clean for anyone who actually lives here. The counter ran the length of the back wall-scarred wood that had absorbed decades of spilled beer and bad decisions. Behind it, Claire Bennett moved with the efficient grace of someone who'd learned to carry 3 plates and not waste a single step doing it. 23 years old, and she'd already outlived more hardship than most people twice her age would ever know. James's chest tightened the way it always did when he saw her, not his daughter by blood, but his daughter in every way that mattered. She'd been 5 months old when his best friend Robert died in a firefight outside Kandahar, an IED that left nothing to send home except a flag and a baby girl with no one else in the world. James had been 33, then career military, with no plans for anything except the next deployment. Taking in Robert's daughter should have been temporary, a bridge until proper family could be found. But Robert's parents were dead, his ex-wife long gone, and the closest relative was a cousin in Florida who couldn't be bothered to return a phone call. So temporary became permanent, and James Mitchell learned to change diapers between training exercises, to pack lunches before dawn patrols, to be present for parent-teacher conferences instead of Black Ops briefings. He'd given the Army 4 more years after that, then hung it up when Claire turned 5 and needed stability more than he needed another medal. People said he'd sacrificed his career for her. He'd never seen it that way. The Army had given him purpose when he was young and stupid enough to think purpose only came from a uniform. Claire had given him something better, a reason to be more than just a weapon someone else pointed at distant enemies. She looked up now, caught his eye from across the room, and her face lit with the smile that made every mile of driving worth it. He settled into his corner table, the one with his back to the wall, and clear view of the entrance while Claire finished taking an order from the couple. When she finally made her way over, she brought coffee without asking the good stuff she kept hidden from the regular customers. Her voice carried the warmth of genuine affection. "You look tired, Dad." The word dad still caught him sometimes, even after 18 years of hearing it. James wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into joints that ached more every winter. "Just getting old, kiddo. Happens to everyone who doesn't die young." Claire slid into the seat across from him, stealing a moment between tables. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame a face that looked too much like Robert's for James's comfort. Same stubborn jaw, same eyes that saw more than they should. She'd inherited her father's awareness, that quality that made good soldiers and good people the ability to notice when something was wrong before anyone else admitted it. Her concern showed in the way she studied him. "You're not 86, you're 56, that's not old. Feels like 86 some days. That's because you sit alone in that cabin drinking bad coffee and acting like the world ended when you retired." She wasn't wrong. 2 years since he'd turned in his papers, and James still hadn't figured out what a man did when the only thing he was good at was protecting people in places most folks couldn't find on a map. He'd opened a security consulting firm, corporate bodyguard work that paid well and bored him stupid. Rich executives
must
who thought
protect
someone
the
might
innocent
kidnap
at all
them for
costs.
ransom politicians who needed to feel important, the occasional witness protection detail that at least used some of his training. But it was all hollow theater instead of purpose. The real truth, the one he didn't say out loud even to Claire, was that every morning he woke up and couldn't remember why. Not in a suicidal way, James Mitchell had seen too much real death to romanticize it, but in the way of a soldier without orders, a guardian and without anyone to guard. Claire had her own life now, this job and an apartment in Billings, and dreams of maybe community college next year. She didn't need him anymore, not really. Dinner once a month and a phone call every week, and that was the sum total of his importance to another human being. "I'm fine," he lied, because that's what you told people who worried about you. Liar. They talked about surface things after that. Her shift schedule, his latest consulting job, some tech CEO's trip to Seattle, standing around looking intimidating. While nothing happened, the weather turning mean, whether he'd remembered to winterize his truck, the comfortable rhythms of family blood or otherwise.
We must protect
James let
the
her voice
innocent
wash
at all
over him,
costs.
content just to be needed for something, even if it was just showing up once a month to prove he was still breathing. The storm hit without much warning. One moment the windows showed darkness and distant stars. The next they rattled with wind that came howling down from the mountains like something alive and angry. Temperature dropped so fast James could see it in the way the glass fogged and how the couple near the window pulled their chair back from the sudden cold radiating off the panes. Claire stood already moving toward the thermostat, but more immediate problems arrived before she got there. The door crashed open and people stumbled through, shaking off snow that hadn't been falling 5 minutes ago. Then more and more, until suddenly the quiet Thursday night became a packed house of travelers desperate to escape whatever hell the weather had decided to unleash. James counted them automatically 12, 15, 20, while his instincts prickled with the wrongness of it all. Groups this size didn't travel together, and the way they scattered to different tables without acknowledging each other suggested they'd never met before tonight. Just strangers caught by the same storm,
We must
seeking the
protect
same
the
shelter.
innocent at all
But
costs.
something felt off in a way James couldn't articulate, a tension that vibrated under the normal sounds of people settling in, ordering food, complaining about the cold. He'd learned to trust that feeling in countries where ignoring it got you killed. Here in a diner on the Montana-Wyoming border, it probably meant nothing. Probably. Claire moved through the sudden crowd with practiced efficiency, taking orders and deflecting the inevitable irritation of people who'd had their plans disrupted. James watched her work while pretending to study his coffee, protective instincts engaged despite the absence of any clear threat. Just strangers eating dinner. Nothing to worry about. Yet he couldn't shake the awareness, couldn't stop his eyes from tracking movements, categorizing potential problems. Most of the new arrivals were exactly what they appeared to be: truckers' ranch hands, a family with 2 kids, who were more excited about the adventure than their exhausted parents. But there were others. The woman in the 2 expensive coats sitting alone near the kitchen, her posture wrong for someone seeking shelter, too alert. The man at the bar who'd ordered water and nothing
We
else,
must
his
protect
hands
the
hidden under
innocent
the
at
counter.
all costs.
The group of 4 in matching dark jackets at the center table, speaking in voices too low to hear, but with the coordination of people who knew each other very well. Maybe James was just paranoid. Probably was. Paranoia and retirement went together like whiskey and regret. But his hand still drifted toward his hip, where he'd carried a sidearm for most of his adult life, finding nothing there except his belt and the reminder that civilian life meant civilian rules. No weapons, no threats, no purpose, except getting through another day without anyone needing him for anything that mattered. Then his attention caught on the corner booth, the one tucked beside the cold stone wall where the overhead light didn't quite reach. A man sat there alone, hood up despite being indoors, his back to the room in a way that suggested either complete comfort or complete foolishness. On instinct alone, James categorized it as the former. The man's posture was too controlled, too still, holding something in his arms that occasionally shifted. A bundle of cloth blankets, maybe. Except blankets
We must
didn't move on
protect
their
the
own,
innocent
and they
at all
definitely
costs.
didn't make the soft, unhappy sounds that were almost but not quite drowned out by the diner's noise. A baby. Who the hell traveled in this weather with an infant? Claire was already heading that direction with a water pitcher, her natural compassion overriding any sense of professional distance. James's protective instincts went into overdrive, his body tensing with the urge to intercept her, to put himself between his daughter in whatever unknown the hooded stranger represented. But that would be crazy overreacting in a way that would embarrass them both and prove he really had gone paranoid in retirement. So he stayed in his seat and watched as Claire approached the table, her voice carrying with its characteristic warmth. "Refill, sir." The man didn't look up immediately, his attention focused on the bundle in his arms. When he finally responded, his voice was cold, not with hostility, but with the exhaustion of someone who pushed past normal human limits. "Please." Claire poured water while the bundle shifted again, and this time the sound was unmistakable, a baby's cry, weak and miserable. She set down the pitcher with the careful movements of someone trying not to startle a situation she didn't fully understand. "Rough night for traveling with a little one." "You have no idea." The baby's cries intensified, and the man tried to rock the bundle with movements that were awkward despite obvious effort. He was exhausted, James realized. Not just tired, but hollowed out, like someone who'd been carrying a weight for far too long, without relief or hope of it. Claire's voice softened further. "Want me to hold her for a second? Sometimes babies just need different arms." This time the man did look up, and even from across the diner, James felt the moment crystallize into something significant. The hood fell back enough to reveal a face that was striking in its sharp angles and pallor skin too pale to be healthy or entirely human. But it was the eyes that made James's training kick into high alert silver. Not gray, but actual metallic silver, catching the dim light like polished corners. No one had eyes like that. No one human. The man's response came slowly, each word measured. "That's kind of you, but I don't think that's wise."
We must protect the innocent at all
The
costs.
baby wailed louder, and several customers turned to look, their expressions ranging from sympathy to irritation. The man winced and adjusted his grip, but the crying only increased, building toward the kind of sustained scream that could empty a restaurant faster than a fire alarm. James could see the exact moment Claire made her decision, her natural caretaking instinct overriding whatever warnings the stranger's appearance might have triggered. She leaned down with her best reassuring smile. "Look, I've got 6 younger siblings back home. I promise I won't drop her. Just let me try." The man's resistance wavered exhaustion, winning over whatever concerns kept him from accepting help. He started to loosen his grip on the bundle just as Claire reached for the water pitcher again, some instinct making her want to clear the table before taking the child. That's when it happened. A tiny hand shot out from the blankets, impossibly fast, latching onto Claire's sleeve near her wrist. The baby's grip was strong, desperate even, and for a moment it looked like any infant, seeking contact, seeking comfort from someone who might offer it. Then the baby bit down.
We must protect
Not
the
hard,
innocent at
not
all
enough
costs.
to break skin through the fabric, but with enough pressure for Claire to feel it, to freeze in place as her eyes went wide with shock and confusion. James was already moving his chair, scraping back as training overrode thought, as protective instinct launched him across the diner toward whatever threat had just manifested. But he was too slow, too far away, and the damage was already done. Claire looked down at her sleeve at the tiny mouth clamped onto the fabric, and in the dim light of the corner booth, she saw what made her breath catch, audible even over the diner's noise. Teeth, small, white, perfect, and wrong. 2 delicate fangs, sharp enough to be unmistakable, pressing into the fabric of her work shirt. The diner erupted. Someone screamed the word that detonated like a grenade. "Vampire!" Chairs screeched across old floorboards as people scrambled back tables, overturning in the sudden chaos of Super of 20 strangers all trying to get away from a baby that shouldn't exist. Frank grabbed the shotgun he kept under the bar, his trucker's instincts prioritizing
We must
survival
protect
over
the
legality.
innocent at all costs.
Billy knocked over his burger, reaching for the hunting knife on his belt. The tourists pressed themselves against the window, the mother covering her children's eyes as if that would protect them from whatever nightmare had just revealed itself. The 4 men in dark jackets at the center table were on their feet in synchronized movement. That proved James's earlier instincts right. They knew each other, they were organized, and they'd been waiting for exactly this. 2 of them had crossbows that appeared from under their table, with professional speed loaded and aimed before most people had finished processing what they'd seen. James's mind worked in combat time that stretched out clarity, where seconds became minutes and training rode over panic. He cataloged threats, the shotgun, the crossbows, the knife, the coordinated hunters who'd clearly been tracking the hooded man. He plotted trajectories, who had clear shot, who would fire first, where the fatal angles were. He calculated outcomes in 30 seconds, this diner would be a bloodbath, with Claire standing at the center of the killing ground. Unacceptable. He closed the distance
We
at
must
a dead
protect
run,
the innocent at
his
all
56-year-old body responding with muscle memory that didn't care about aching joints or years since his last combat deployment. His voice came out in the command tone that had once moved entire squads into action, loud enough to cut through the panic. Everyone calm down. He reached Claire in 4 strides, positioning himself between her and the shotgun, his body making the calculations that Frank's finger on that trigger was the immediate threat, even if the crossbows were ultimately more dangerous. His hands came up in a gesture that was half placating, half ready to grab for the weapon if necessary. Back away from the girl and the child. His tone allowed for no argument. Now. The crowd hesitated, caught between flight instinct and the authority in his voice. Frank's shotgun wavered but didn't lower. The hunters with crossbows kept their weapons trained on the hooded man, who'd gone very still in a way that reminded James of predators he'd encountered in countries where predators still hunted humans. Billy's knife stayed out, his knuckles white around the handle. James didn't take his eyes off Frank's trigger finger.
We must
I said
protect the
stand
innocent
down,
at
all
all
of you.
costs.
Nobody's shooting anything until we figure out what's going on. The hunter, who appeared to be the leader of the 4, a scarred man with the flat affect of someone who'd seen too much and felt too little, finally spoke. You're protecting a monster, old man. That thing is vampire spawn. That thing, James's voice went cold in a way that made even the hunter hesitate, is a baby. And the last time I checked, we don't shoot infants in this country. Not even the weird ones. You don't understand what... I understand you're pointing a weapon at a civilian in a public place. I understand you've got about 10 seconds to lower it before I decide you're the bigger threat. It was a bluff, mostly. James was unarmed, middle-aged, and outnumbered by people who clearly knew how to handle their weapons. But he'd learned a long time ago that certainty mattered more than firepower in situations like this. Project enough conviction, and people assumed you had backup. They couldn't see training. They couldn't match willingness to do things they couldn't imagine. The hunter's eyes narrowed, reassessing. Whatever he saw in James's stance made him lower the crossbow slightly, though he kept it ready. You military was Special Forces, 24 years. Then you should know better than to interfere in vampire business. I know better than to let armed men threaten my daughter. That's the only business I care about right now. Behind James, Claire's voice came out shaky but determined. Dad, I'm okay. But the baby, though, don't move, kiddo. Just stay exactly where you are. The hooded man finally spoke, his cold voice carrying undertones of something that might have been respect. You're military. I can tell from how you position yourself. James didn't turn, didn't take his eyes off the primary threats. Now I'm just a father protecting his daughter. She's not your daughter, not by blood. How the hell did he know that James's jaw tightened? Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. The man stood slowly, keeping his hands visible in a gesture that suggested he understood threat dynamics as well as James did. The baby in his arms had gone quiet, apparently content now that she'd made
We
contact
must
with Claire.
protect the innocent at all
In the better light of
costs.
standing, James could see the man clearly for the first time, tall easily, 6'5", with the kind of build that came from genetics rather than gym work. The silver eyes weren't contacts or trick of light. They were real, inhuman, ancient, in a way that made James's instincts scream warnings his conscious mind couldn't quite process. The man's voice carried the weight of absolute sincerity. On that we agree. Blood doesn't make family, choice does. So talk, before this crowd tears you apart out of fear. For a moment, James thought the man wouldn't answer, would choose some kind of prideful silence that would force everyone into violence no one really wanted. But then the exhaustion showed through, again the desperation of someone who'd run out of options and found himself in a corner with no good exits. The child is vampire. My daughter, her name is Lily. The diner went silent except for the wind hammering at the windows. Frank's shotgun dipped, further uncertainty warring with fear. The hunters maintained their weapons, but didn't advance. Everyone waited for someone else to make the next move to decide whether this ended in violence or some other outcome. James's tactical mind processed the new information, categorizing it alongside everything else that didn't quite fit into his understanding of the world. Vampires, real vampires. The logical part of his brain rejected it, but the evidence was standing 15 feet away, with inhuman eyes and a baby that had fangs. 24 years in Special Forces had taught him that the universe was stranger and darker than most people wanted to believe. He'd seen things in classified facilities in remote deserts that had no official explanation, horrors that got filed under national security and forgotten by everyone except the soldiers who'd witnessed them. So maybe vampires, maybe that's what tonight was teaching him. And the bite, what was that about? Marcus, though James didn't know his name yet, studied Claire with an expression that mixed wonder and something that might have been grief. She chose your daughter as her protector. Protector, what the hell does that mean? It means, the vampire's voice dropped to something almost reverent.
We must
That
protect
what
the
just
innocent
happened
at all
hasn't
costs.
happened in 400 years. Your daughter has a gift, a bloodline we thought extinct. When my daughter bit her, she formed a bond, ancient, supernatural, unbreakable, once completed. James's mind raced through implications. What kind of bond? The kind that keeps my daughter alive. Without a protector, Lily will die within weeks. With one, he looked at Claire with an intensity that made James's protective instincts flare. With one, she might survive. She might grow up. She might have a future. That's not Claire's problem. I understand, but my daughter chose her. And vampires. Our children don't choose randomly. They recognize something, a resonance in the blood, a compatibility we don't fully understand. When they bite, when they form that connection, it's because they've found the one person in the world who can keep them alive. The baby Lily made a soft cooing sound, her tiny hand still gripping Claire's sleeve. Not biting anymore, just holding on like a drowning person, clutching driftwood. Claire looked down at the infant
We must
with an
protect
expression
the innocent
James
at
knew
all
too
costs.
well. The one that said her heart was already engaged in a fight her brain hadn't signed up for. One of the hunters spat on the floor. Don't listen to his lies. Protectors are weapons, nothing more. They corrupt our children, turn them weak with human sentiment. I'm not talking to you. James didn't bother to look at the hunter. I'm talking to him. This vampire with the exhausted eyes who's been traveling with a sick baby and no options left. Marcus's shoulders dropped slightly, the first crack in his controlled exterior. You're perceptive. Yes, I've tried everything, 50 nannies, the best doctors our kind has. Nothing worked. She just kept fading, growing weaker, refusing to eat or sleep or engage with anything. I was watching my daughter die, and I couldn't stop. So you came here to a diner on the border hoping for what? That some random human would happen to have this protector, blood. I came here because I was out of road and out of hope.
We
This
must
was as
protect
far
the
as we could
innocent
run
at all
before I had to
costs.
turn back or watch her die. I stopped for water and rest, nothing more. What happened with your daughter? That was as much a surprise to me as it was to you. The sincerity in his voice was hard to fake, even for someone who might have had centuries to practice lying. James's instincts said the vampire was telling the truth, at least as he understood it. That didn't make the situation any less dangerous, any less insane, any less likely to end with Claire in a situation James couldn't protect her from. But before he could respond, Claire's voice cut through his thoughts. What happens if I leave? If I just walk away and never see your daughter again? Marcus's face went carefully blank. The bond is forming but not complete. If you leave now before it solidifies, Lily will suffer. She'll cry, she'll refuse food, she'll deteriorate. But she might survive. Might. I've known bondings interrupted this early that led to the child's death within days. I've known others that took months. There's no guarantee either way.
We must
But
protect
if
the
I
innocent
stay,
at all costs.
then your life changes forever. You'll be bound to her, to me, to a world you don't understand and didn't ask for. You'll have enemies you've never met, dangers you can't imagine. His voice dropped even further. And one day, probably sooner than you'd like, you might die protecting her. Because that's what protectors do. It's what the bond demands. The diner had gone so quiet, James could hear the wind screaming outside, could hear his own heartbeat in his ears as he processed what the vampire was really saying. Not a request for help, but a death sentence, wrapped in supernatural language and delivered with the flat honesty of someone who'd run out of pretty lies to tell. Claire's response came immediately. I need to talk to my father, alone. Marcus nodded, his movement careful. Of course, but understand others are coming. The people who've been hunting us, they'll have felt the bond form. They'll know a protector has awakened. We don't have much time before this place becomes a battlefield. The hunters at the center table tensed at that, their crossbows coming back
We
up.
must protect the
The
innocent
leader's
at
voice
all
carried
costs.
grim certainty. He's not wrong. A protector awakening sends out a signal that every vampire within 100 miles can sense. They'll come, all of them, either to claim the protector for their own purposes or to kill her before she becomes a threat. Then I suggest James's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion, that everyone in this diner who isn't directly involved in this situation gets the hell out. Now, before whatever's coming arrives. People didn't need to be told twice. Within 60 seconds, the diner had emptied, except for Frank, who'd pulled the shotgun back under the bar, but kept his hand on it. James guided Claire to his corner table, putting his back to the wall, and her in the chair, where he could watch both the vampire and the hunter simultaneously. The moment they were relatively private, Claire's composure cracked. "Dad, what is happening?" "I don't know, kiddo, but I need you to think clearly. Can you do that?" "I don't know. There's a baby with fangs who bit me, and apparently I'm some kind of supernatural bodyguard. And breathe, training and calm. You can
We
panic
must
later."
protect the innocent
She
at
took a
all
shaky
costs.
breath, some of the steel that made her Robert's daughter showing through the fear. "Okay, thinking clearly. What do I do?" James wanted to tell her to run to get in his truck and drive away from this insanity as fast as the engine could carry them. But he'd seen her face when she looked at that baby, seen the way her protective instincts engaged. Claire had spent her whole childhood helping him raise her younger foster siblings, 6 kids rotating through their home over the years before James retired, and she'd developed a caretaker's heart that couldn't just switch off because the baby in question had fangs. His voice came out rougher than intended. "Tell me what you want to do, not what you think you should do, not what would make me happy. What does your gut say?" "That baby needs me. I can feel it somehow, like an ache in my chest that gets worse when I think about leaving." Is that the bond he was talking about? Probably. Which means you're already compromised at least partly. So I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. But some
We
choices
must
hurt
protect the
more than
innocent
others.
at all costs.
Claire looked over at Marcus, who'd returned to his corner booth with Lily calm against his chest for the first time all evening. The vampire wasn't watching them, giving them privacy in a way that suggested he understood human need for space, even if he wasn't human himself. Her voice steadied. "He said I might die." "He did. Young, maybe in 10 years, maybe 20. That's what he implied. But if I leave, that baby definitely dies soon." James closed his eyes briefly, knowing where this was going and hating it. Probably, though, he said there was a chance, not a promise. And even if she survives physically, she'll be traumatized, damaged by the broken bond. "Claire, I'm not saying I've decided, but I need you to understand something." She reached across the table, took his calloused hand in hers. "You didn't have to take me in. When Robert died, you could have found someone else. Social services family, anyone. But you chose me. You chose to upend your entire life, sacrifice your career, become a father when you'd never planned on it. You chose me even though
We
it
must
was
protect
hard,
the
even
innocent
though
at all
it cost you
costs.
everything you'd built. That was different. How? Because I was human, because you knew my father. Dad, you taught me that some things are worth the cost, that protecting the innocent matters more than personal safety, that being needed is better than being comfortable." Her grip tightened. "That baby is innocent. She needs me, and I need to be needed for something that matters. Does that make sense?" It made terrible sense. James saw himself reflected in her words, the same restlessness that had driven him out here tonight, the same hollow feeling that came from having purpose and then losing it. She was 23 and already feeling what he'd been fighting since retirement, the sense that life without meaning was just waiting to die. He wanted to argue to find the logical flaw that would let him protect her from this choice. But logic had nothing to do with what she was describing. This was about heart, about values, about becoming the person you were supposed to be even when it hurt. His voice came out resigned. "If you go, I go. Non-negotiable." Claire blinked.
We must
"What?
protect the innocent
You
at
heard
all
me?
costs.
I didn't spend 23 years raising you to lose you to vampire royalty without at least being there to watch your back. Dad, you can't. I can and I will. That's the deal. You want to do this insane thing, fine. But you do it with backup. You just said this might kill me. Then we'll deal with that when it comes, together. James pushed back from the table decision made, even though every tactical instinct screamed that he was choosing wrong. I'm too old to start making smart choices now anyway. They approached Marcus's booth together, James in front, out of habit, Claire close behind. The vampire looked up at their approach, his silver eyes reading something in their expressions that made him straighten. Claire spoke before James could. I'll stay for now, but I want to understand what I'm agreeing to. Everything. No surprises. Marcus's relief was visible. Of course, I'll tell you everything I know. And I'm coming too. James's tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. As security, protection, whatever you want to call it, Claire goes nowhere without
We
backup.
must protect the innocent
The
at
vampire
all
studied
costs.
James with new intensity. You're her father. I am. You raised her since she was 5 months old. Then you understand what it means to protect someone you didn't plan to love. James's jaw tightened at how accurately that landed. I do. I'm not sure what use a human would be in the world we're going to. Every vampire has centuries of combat experience, speed and strength. You can't match senses that would make your military training look primitive. Then I guess I'll have to learn fast. I'm old, not dead, and I've protected high-value assets in hostile territory for most of my adult life. Pretty sure I can manage one baby vampire and a 23-year-old who never listens to reasonable advice. Hey, Claire protested weakly. Marcus's lips twitched in something that might have been amusement. Very well, both of you come. But understand where we're going, your military training won't make you special. It won't give you status or respect. You'll be human in a world of predators. Story of my life. And the people who
We
rule
must
that world,
protect the innocent
they won't
at all
accept your daughter
costs.
easily. Many will see her as threat to be eliminated. Others will try to use her control, turn her into a weapon. You'll both be in constant danger. James looked at this baby in Marcus's arms and at Lily's tiny hand still wrapped around Claire's sleeve, even across the distance between them. The infant's eyes amber. He could see now, not silver like her father's, tracked Claire with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone barely old enough to focus. This was the mission then, the purpose he'd been waiting for. Not glorious, not simple, possibly suicidal, but real. Someone who needed him, needed them both, and had nowhere else to turn. His voice came out with the certainty that had once moved soldiers into combat. Then I guess we'd better be ready. What's the first step? Marcus stood in one fluid motion that demonstrated exactly how outclassed James would be in any physical confrontation. First, we get out of Montana before the hunters decide to attack despite your intervention. There's a place a few hours north where someone can explain what's happening
We
better
must
than I
protect
can.
the innocent
An
at
old
all
friend
costs.
who knows the history, the prophecies, the real cost of what your daughter is agreeing to. Why can't you explain it? Because I'm biased. I want her to stay to save my daughter. Thomas Reed will tell her the truth, all of it, and then she can make a final decision. If she chooses to leave after that, I'll find another way. Somehow. The desperation in those last two words said everything about how unlikely another way was. But James appreciated the honesty, the vampire's willingness to give them an out, even though it would cost him everything. One of the hunters stood, his crossbow still in hand, but pointed at the floor. You're making a mistake, soldier. Vampires lie, it's what they do. He'll use your daughter and discard her when he's done. James turned to face the hunter fully. Maybe, but that's our mistake to make. Stand down and let us pass, or we're going to have a problem. We could stop you, 4 against 2, 4 against 1. Claire's not a combatant, and I'm 56 years old with bad knees and no weapon.
We
So
must
yes,
protect
you
the
could probably
innocent at
take
all
me.
costs.
Question is whether you want to deal with what happens when you murder a former Special Forces operator in front of witnesses. He nodded toward Frank, still watching from behind the bar. Because that's what it would be. Murder, not self-defense. And I guarantee that even if you win, it'll cost you more than it's worth. The hunter stared at him for a long moment, weighing options. Finally, he lowered the crossbow completely. Your funeral, but when he betrays you, when your daughter ends up dead, or worse, remember that we tried to warn you. I'll keep that in mind. They left through the back entrance, avoiding the front where the storm still raged. Marcus had a vehicle waiting, a black SUV with tinted windows and the kind of armor plating James recognized from military transports. Two figures sat in the front seats, their silhouettes suggesting vampire guards or soldiers. The back had been modified with an infant seat, the kind of preparation that spoke to a father who thought through every detail of keeping his child safe. James's truck stayed in the parking lot. They'd retrieve it later, maybe if there was a later.
We must
Right
protect
now,
the
the
innocent
priority
at
was
all
distance
costs.
and answers in that order. Claire climbed into the back with Lily the baby settling against her immediately with contentment that seemed miraculous given the screaming from earlier. James took the front passenger seat, his tactical mind already cataloging the vehicle's capabilities, the guards positioning, the routes they might take. The female vampire in the driver's seat glanced at him with curiosity, but no hostility. Her voice carried accented English. "I'm Sophia. That's Julian." The male vampire beside her nodded acknowledgement. "We've been with Lord Thorne for 70 years. If you're going to ride with us, you should know we'd die for that child in the back seat." "Good, because if you don't, I'll kill you myself." Julian actually laughed at that, a sound without mockery. "I like him. He's stupid brave or brave stupid, but he's got spine." Marcus settled into the seat beside Claire, his attention immediately going to Lily as if he couldn't quite believe she was calm. "We drive through the night. Thomas's place is 4 hours north in the mountains. We'll be there before
We must
dawn."
protect the innocent
The
at all
drive passed
costs.
in tense silence, broken only by Lily's occasional coos and the sound of wind battering the armored vehicle. James watched the darkness through the windshield, his thoughts churning through everything that had just happened, everything he'd agreed to. 24 years in the military, and he'd never felt more out of his depth than he did right now, heading into literal darkness with creatures he thought were mythology until an hour ago. But Claire was breathing steadily in the back seat, and that mattered more than his own fear. He'd protected her since she was an infant. He'd protect her while vampire world, or human world, or whatever impossible middle ground they were heading toward. His voice came out quiet enough that only Sophia and Julian would hear. "Tell me about your lord. The truth, not propaganda." Sophia considered the question while navigating a turn. "He's 800 years old, as fought in the Crusades, the 100 Years' War conflicts you've never heard of because humans forgot him. He's king of Shadow Valley, ruler of territories that span from here to the Canadian border. Vampires answer to him, or they leave,
We must
or they
protect
die.
the innocent
He's
at
not
all
cruel,
costs.
but he's not soft. Justice matters to him more than mercy, though he's capable of both." And his daughter, born 6 months ago, first vampire birth in their bloodline in 2 centuries. The pregnancy nearly killed his wife. The birth did kill her. Lord Thorne has been raising Lily alone since, and watching her fade no matter what he tried, until tonight. Julian added, "You should know the protector bond, it's real. Ancient magic old as our kind. We thought the bloodline extinct killed off 400 years ago in purges that slaughtered thousands. But apparently someone survived, passed it down. Your daughter, she's the first protector to manifest in living memory." James processed that, and that makes her valuable. That makes her dangerous. To the right people, she's a weapon. To others, a threat. To Lord Thorne, she's hope. But everyone who knows what she is will have opinions about what should happen to her. Strong opinions, violent opinions. Good to know. They drove on through mountain passes where the storm made the roads treacherous
We
even
must
for a
protect
vehicle
the
built to
innocent
handle
at
them.
all costs.
James dozed fitfully, never quite sleeping, always aware of Claire behind him and the 2 vampires up front. He'd spent enough time in hostile territory to understand when he was surrounded by potential threats, but his instincts kept insisting these particular threats weren't immediate. Sophia and Julian protected Lily, and Lily needed Claire, which meant by extension, they'd protect Claire too. It was the best he could hope for, given the circumstances. Dawn was still hours away when they pulled up to an isolated cabin that looked like it had grown out of the mountainside rather than been built on it. Log construction stone chimney windows that reflected the headlights with a gleam that suggested bulletproof glass. James cataloged approaches and defenses automatically. Good sight lines, limited access points, defensible position. Whoever lived here understood security. An old man emerged onto the porch before they'd even killed the engine. Old even by visual standards, white hair falling past his shoulders frame, stooped with age. But when the headlights caught his eyes, they reflected back with the same inhuman gleam as Marcus's and the guards.
We must protect
Another
the innocent
vampire
at
then,
all costs.
one old enough to look his age, which suggested centuries. Marcus climbed out first, his movements careful not to disturb Lily, who'd fallen asleep against Claire's shoulder. James exited simultaneously, positioning himself between the cabin and the back seat on instinct. The old vampire studied him with open curiosity. His voice creaked like old wood. "Lord Thorne, you didn't mention bringing guests." "Plans changed, Thomas. This is James Mitchell, former Special Forces, and his daughter Claire, who..." Marcus trailed off as if unsure how to explain. "Who has the blood?" Thomas finished, his gaze sharpening on Claire as she climbed out with Lily. "I can feel it from here, the bond forming not complete, but growing stronger every moment they're together. 400 years, and I never thought I'd see this again." Claire's voice came out uncertain. "You know about protectors. I've studied them my entire life, girl. 412 years, give or take a decade. I was 18 when the purges began, when vampires decided that protectors were too dangerous to let live. I've spent centuries trying to understand what was lost." He gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside, all of you. We have much to discuss and precious little time to do it." The cabin's interior surprised James with its warmth and clutter. Books everywhere stacked floor to ceiling with the chaos of someone who valued knowledge over organization. Maps covered one wall, ancient-looking documents preserved under glass. A fire burned in the hearth despite no visible means of starting it recently. The furniture was worn but comfortable, the kind that suggested actual use rather than decoration. Thomas moved with surprising grace for someone who looked 90, settling into a chair near the fire and gesturing for others to sit. James remained standing, his position chosen to cover both the entrance and the window. Old habits, the vampire's attention focused on Claire. "Let me see the mark." "What mark?" "Where the child bit you, the bond leaves traces." Claire pushed up her sleeve, revealing her wrist where Lily had clamped down. The fabric showed no damage, but the skin beneath. James's breath caught. Faint tracings like silver tattoos, barely visible under the surface, spiraled from the point of contact. Delicate patterns that looked almost like ancient script, though in no language he recognized. Thomas leaned close, his expression grave. "It's begun, the binding. Give it another day and it'll be permanent." Claire pulled her sleeve back down. "What does that mean, permanent?" "It means you'll be connected to that child for the rest of your life. You'll feel her emotions, sense her needs, know when she's in danger before anyone else does. The bond will make you stronger, faster, harder to kill. Your body will heal injuries that would cripple a normal human. You'll age slower, live longer. Protectors have historically survived into their 50s and 60s, even in violent times." That sounds good. "It comes with a price. Every moment you're separated from her, you'll feel it like a physical ache. If she's hurt, you'll feel phantom pain. If she's threatened, you'll throw yourself into danger without thought or hesitation. The bond won't give you a choice. It'll demand you protect her with your life. And if I refuse, if I walk away now..." Thomas's expression softened with something like pity. "I won't lie to you. You can break the bond still if you leave within the next day. It'll hurt for you, psychic pain that might last weeks. For the child, much worse. She'll cry, refuse food, deteriorate rapidly. Most children who lose their protector this early die within a month. Some survive but remain damaged, never fully developing, never trusting anyone again." Claire's face went pale. "So it's not really a choice. It's always a choice, a terrible one, but still a choice." James spoke for the first time since entering. "Tell her about the prophecy, the part where protectors die young." Thomas's gaze shifted to him, measuring. "You already know." Vampire back at the diner implied it. "Said she might die protecting the child." "I want her to hear it from someone who studies this, who knows the history." "Fair enough." Thomas turned back to Claire. "Protectors form bonds with vampire royalty, almost always children. They serve as guardians, defenders, and moral anchors. The magic makes them formidable, but it also makes them targets. In recorded history, every protector has died defending their charge. Every single one. The youngest was 19, killed 2 years after bonding. The oldest made it to 62, which is remarkable considering she bonded at 23. 62, Claire repeated quietly. "So worst case, I've got 40 years. Worst case, you've got weeks if enemies learn what you are and strike before you're ready. Best case, you live a full life by historical standards and die old by protector standards." Thomas's voice gentled. I won't pretend the odds are good, but I also won't pretend they're hopeless. The protector, who lived to 62, her name was Margaret. She was smart, careful, trained constantly. She didn't martyr herself at every battle. She chose her battles and survived most of them. Did she have help? She had her vampire lord, his forces, and her own wisdom. That was enough. Claire looked down at
We
Lily,
must
still
protect the
sleeping
innocent
peacefully
at
in her
all
arms.
costs.
Can I ask you something? Of course. The vampires who killed all the protectors 400 years ago. Why, if protectors helped their children, protected them, why would they murder an entire bloodline? Thomas's face darkened. Fear. Protectors didn't just protect children, they influenced them. Royal vampires raised with protectors grew up valuing human life, seeing humans as equals rather than prey. They made reforms, changed laws, sometimes married humans, and diluted the pure bloodlines. The old families saw this as corruption, weakness that would destroy vampire culture. So they killed the protectors, and the children bonded to them, massacred entire generations to preserve their idea of purity. That's genocide. Yes, one we've never acknowledged, never atoned for. It's our shame, girl. And part of why you're in danger now, there are still vampires who believe the purges were justified, who want to finish what their ancestors started. The cabin fell silent except for the fire crackling
We
and
must
wind
protect
howling
the innocent
outside.
at all
James
costs.
watched his daughter process information that should have been impossible mythology that had become lived reality in the space of a few hours. He wanted to tell her they could still leave, still choose the normal life they'd had this morning. But the silver tracings on her wrist said that life was already gone, burned away by a baby's bite and an ancient magic neither of them understood. Claire's voice came out steady despite everything. I want to see the books, the records about protectors. I want to know what I'm getting into. Thomas smiled, the first genuine warmth James had seen from him. Smart girl, knowledge is your best weapon. He stood and moved to a bookshelf, pulling down a massive tome that looked like it should have required 3 people to lift. This is the Codex Protectorum. We have 3 days before the bond becomes permanent. Use that time to read, to learn, to decide with full information. 3 days, Claire repeated. After that, you're bound. For better or worse, for however long you both live. Marcus finally spoke, his voice rough. I'll
We
leave you
must
here with
protect
Thomas
the
if you
innocent
want.
at all costs.
Give you space to decide without me influencing you. No, Claire's response was immediate. If I'm going to do this, I need to know you. Both of you. Not just the history, but the reality. Then we stay. James cleared his throat. We need to discuss security. You said others would come looking for her. What's the timeline? Thomas nodded approvingly. Good question. The bond's awakening sent out a signal, a pulse of magic that every vampire within 100 miles would have felt. Word spreads fast among our kind. I'd estimate you have maybe a week before serious threats arrive. A week to what train, fortify, run. A week to get to Shadow Valley, to Nighthaven. Lord Thorne's city. It's the only place where he has enough forces to protect her properly. James's tactical mind engaged fully, defensible position. Mountain fortress, built into the rock itself. Walls 30 feet thick in places. One main entrance, secondary exits that can be sealed. If you're going to make a stand, that's where you do it. Then we should leave now. Don't waste
We
time
must
here.
protect the innocent at all
Marcus shook
costs.
his head. Claire needs to make an informed choice. And we need Thomas to examine Lily. Make sure the bond is forming correctly. 3 days here, then we travel. That's the plan. James didn't like it. 3 days was a long time when enemies knew your location, but he understood the necessity. Claire needed time to read, to process, to decide if she really wanted this life. And Lily needed medical attention from someone who understood vampire physiology. He settled into a defensive crouch near the window. Fine, 3 days, but I keep watch. Nobody enters this cabin without me knowing about it. You plan to stay awake for 72 hours. I've done worse. As Sophia spoke from where she'd positioned herself near the door. Julian and I will take shifts with you. We don't sleep the same way humans do. Between the 3 of us, we can maintain full coverage. Good. The next 3 days passed in a blur of reading, learning, and preparing for a future none of them had planned. Claire buried herself in the Codex Protectorum, reading by firelight about women who'd lived and died protecting
We must
vampire
protect
children.
the innocent at all
James
costs.
divided his time between watch duties and studying the maps Thomas provided, memorizing routes to Shadow Valley, and identifying potential ambush points. Marcus stayed close to Lily, changing her feeding, her demonstrating the kind of devoted fatherhood James recognized from his own experience. On the second day, Thomas pulled James aside while Claire was absorbed in a particularly dense section about combat techniques. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. Boss, why are you really doing this, your daughter? I understand she's young, idealistic, her heart engaged before her head could stop her. But you're 56. You've lived your life. Why walk into certain danger for a vampire child you don't know? James considered his answer carefully. You ever been a soldier? 7 wars. Then you know what it's like when the fighting stops. When you take off the uniform and suddenly you're just a person. No mission, no purpose, no reason to get up except that your heart keeps beating. He stared out the window at the mountains covered in snow.
We must protect
I
the
retired
innocent
2
at
years
all
ago,
costs.
spent every day since wondering what the point was. Then last night happened and suddenly I have a mission again. Someone who needs me. Something that matters. Even if it kills you. I've spent 30 years in jobs where death was a daily possibility. At least this time I'll know what I died for. Thomas studied him for a long moment. You're a rare breed, James Mitchell. Most humans would run from this. You're running toward death. Most humans never served, never learned that some things are worth dying for. And Claire, you're comfortable with her making that same choice. James's jaw tightened. No, but I raised her to be her own person, to choose her own path. Can't protect her from every danger in the world much as I want to. Best I can do is stand beside her when she faces it. You're a good father. I'm a terrified father doing his best. There's a difference. On the third day, as afternoon shadows lengthened toward evening, Claire closed the codex and stood from where she'd been reading for hours. James looked up from the map he'd been
We must
studying,
protect the
his
innocent
expression
at all
carefully
costs.
neutral, even though his heart hammered with anticipation of her decision. Her voice came out steady. I've made my choice. And I'm staying. Not because I don't understand the risks. I've read about 17 different protectors who died between ages 20 and 40. But also because I understand what matters. That baby needs me. She chose me for reasons I don't fully understand, but that feel right somehow. And she paused, searching for words. I need this too. Need to matter for something bigger than serving eggs at a diner. James crossed to her, pulled her into a hug that said everything words couldn't. Then we do this together. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Marcus approached carefully, Lily awake in his arms. Thank you, both of you. I know that often I'll do everything in my power to minimize it. See that you do? James's tone made it clear this was a promise and a threat simultaneously. Because if anything happens to her that you could have prevented, king or not, we're
We
going
must
to have
protect
problems.
the innocent at all
Understood.
costs.
Thomas cleared his throat. Then it's decided. Tomorrow we travel to Shadow Valley. I'll come with you. The council needs to verify the bond, and I'm the only one alive who can authenticate it. But tonight we prepare. James, I want to show you something. He led James to a locked cabinet, opened it to reveal weapons that looked ancient but well-maintained. Silver Blade's crossbows with modern modifications, stakes that gleamed with some kind of coating. I can't give you vampire strength or speed, but I can give you tools that work against us. Study these tonight. Learn their balance. If you're going to protect your daughter in our world, you need every advantage. James lifted a blade, testing its weight. You're arming me against your own kind. I'm arming a father who's trying to protect his child. That transcends species loyalty. Thomas's expression went distant. I was raised by a protector 300 years ago. Her name was Catherine. She died defending me when I was 16, threw herself between me and assassins sent by vampires who didn't want our bloodline to continue.
We must
I've
protect
spent
the
every
innocent
day
at all
since
costs.
trying to honor her sacrifice. What happened to the assassins? I killed them, all 7. It was the first time I really understood what I was, what I could do when rage overrode restraint. He looked at James directly. Your daughter is doing what Catherine did for me. The least I can do is help you help her survive it. They spent the evening training Thomas, teaching James the basics of fighting opponents faster and stronger than any human. It wasn't formal instruction so much as survival tips, where to strike to slow vampires down, how silver weapons affected their healing, the psychological tricks that worked better than physical force. You can't beat us in direct combat, Thomas explained. But you can surprise us. We're old, we fight by patterns learned over centuries. You fight by adaptation, by changing tactics every engagement. That unpredictability is your advantage. How long did you serve in those 7 wars? Different lengths. Revolutionary War 2 years. War of 18, barely 6 months. Civil War the whole 4 years. I was
We must
invested in that
protect
one,
the
believed in the
innocent at all
cause.
costs.
Both world wars, various conflicts in between. Vietnam was my last, and I swore I'd never fight for humans again after what I saw there. Why not? Because I realized we were monsters too, just different kinds. Killing for reasons as stupid and venal as humans killed for. At least you people had the excuse of short lives and limited perspective. We had centuries to learn better and still chose violence. James cleaned the blade he'd been practicing with, but you're helping now. Because Claire isn't a soldier. She's a young woman who made a choice based on compassion, not politics or power. That's worth protecting. That's worth fighting for. Thomas's voice roughened. Catherine was the same way. She chose me not because she had to, but because she believed I could be better than my nature. I've spent 300 years trying to prove her right. They trained until James's muscles screamed and his reflexes had internalized at least the basics of what Thomas was teaching. It wasn't enough, would never be enough, against opponents who'd been
We must
fighting since
protect the
before his
innocent
country
at
was
all
founded.
costs.
But it was something, a foundation to build on, a place to start. Dawn came cold and clear, the storm finally passed. They loaded into 2 vehicles. This time Thomas had his own truck, ancient but well-maintained. James rode with him, using the travel time to extract more information about Shadow Valley, about the council they'd face, about the dangers Claire would encounter. Lord Marcus rules absolutely, but 7 families form a council that advises him. They can't override his commands, but they can make his life difficult if they choose. And they will choose because accepting a human protector means accepting that humans can influence vampire royalty. That threatens their whole power structure. So we're walking into hostile territory. You're walking into complicated territory. Some will support Marcus because they're loyal. Some will oppose him because they're traditionalists. Most will wait to see which way the wind blows before committing. Thomas navigated a hairpin turn. Your job is to keep Claire alive long enough to prove herself. If she
We
demonstrates
must
real
protect the
ability,
innocent
real
at all
power,
costs.
the opposition will diminish. Vampires respect strength above all else. And if she doesn't, then they'll find ways to remove her that technically don't violate Marcus's protection. Accidents, provocations, situations where she's forced to defend herself against overwhelming odds. Fantastic. They drove through mountain passes that grew progressively stranger, the landscape taking on qualities that shouldn't exist in Montana. Trees darker than natural bark that seemed to absorb light. Sky that stayed perpetually twilight even at noon. Animals that watched from the shadows with eyes that reflected wrong colors. James felt when they crossed the border, even though there was no sign, no marker. The air change grew heavier with something that made his skin prickle. His instincts screamed warnings his conscious mind couldn't quite process. What is this place? Shadow Valley, vampire territory claimed and held for 800 years. The magic here is old, predates even Marcus's family. It keeps the sun weak, extends the night, provides shelter for those
We
who
must
can't
protect
tolerate
the innocent
daylight for
at
long.
all costs.
I thought vampires could walk in daylight. We can, but it weakens us. Direct sunlight for extended periods becomes painful, draining. Here we're always at full strength. It's why Marcus's territory has never fallen to outside attacks. Any human forces trying to invade would be fighting at disadvantage from the moment they cross the border. The city of Nighthaven appeared gradually, first as distant towers against the mountain, then as sprawling structures that seemed carved from the rock itself. Gothic architecture on a scale James had only seen in European cathedrals, but functional rather than decorative. This was a fortress that happened to be beautiful, a statement of power that had stood for centuries. Marcus's vehicle pulled up beside them as they reached the outer gates. Guards appeared, vampires in dark armor, with weapons that looked medieval but well-maintained. They knelt when they saw Marcus, their heads bowed in genuine deference. One guard approached, his voice formal. "Your Majesty, we weren't expecting your return so soon. The council was told you'd be conducting border inspections for another month." Marcus's
We must
tone went
protect
flat.
the innocent
"Plans
at all
changed.
costs.
Prepare my private chambers and send word to the council that I'll address them tomorrow night." Of course, Your Majesty. The guard's eyes flickered to the vehicles to Claire, visible through the window with Lily. Should we prepare additional accommodations? The human stays with me, Royal Wing, and James Mitchell. He gestured toward where James was climbing out of Thomas's truck. We'll have quarters adjacent. He's head of Lily's security detail as of now. The guard's surprise was visible but controlled. Head of security, Your Majesty, but he's human. Yes, he's also former Special Forces with 24 years combat experience. Unless you have comparable qualifications, no, Your Majesty, then my decision stands. Show them to their quarters. The palace interior was overwhelming in its scale and grandeur. Vaulted ceilings painted with scenes James couldn't quite decipher in the dim light. Portraits lining walls, generations of the Thorne family staring out with silver eyes and expressions ranging from benevolent to terrifying. Everything spoke of age, power, and permanence that made James feel small and temporary. The Royal Wing occupied the top floor, accessible only by a single staircase that a handful of defenders could hold against an army. Tactical part of James's brain approved, even as the human part felt increasingly out of place. These weren't just wealthy quarters, this was history legacy, the kind of space where decisions affecting thousands were made without oversight or challenge. Marcus led them to a suite that was larger than James's entire cabin. The main room had furniture that looked antique but comfortable, a fireplace big enough to stand in windows overlooking the entire city. An adjoining door led to a smaller room prepared as a nursery, soft colors, and careful lighting that suggested someone had put thought into what an infant would need. This was meant for Lily and Evelyn. Marcus's voice carried old pain. My wife spent months preparing it. She died before seeing it finished. Claire moved through the space with appropriate reverence, understanding she was walking through someone's grief. It's beautiful. Evelyn would have liked you, I think. She valued compassion over politics, art over strategy. He set Lily down in the crib that dominated one corner. Your quarters connect through that door. James, yours are through the opposite door. You'll have access to my private armory. Thomas sent ahead a list of weapons he thought you should have. James tested the door, noted how it locked from the inside with mechanisms that looked modern despite the ancient appearance. Security protocols. Guards at the main entrance to the wing. You'll meet them shortly. Julian and Sophia, plus 4 others I trust completely. No one enters without their clearance or mine. Windows are reinforced proof against everything short of military explosives. There are escape routes if needed, passages built into the walls that lead down and out of the city. Show me. They spent an hour going over security in detail. Marcus demonstrating the hidden doors and explaining the tunnel system built by paranoid ancestors who'd known that even kings could face coups. James memorized routes, counted exits, calculated timing for evacuation scenarios. Some habits were too ingrained to break just because
we must protect the innocent
worlds.
At all costs.
When they returned to the main room, they found an old vampire waiting. Ancient, his frame stooped with age that suggested centuries, his eyes carrying the weight of time in a way that made even Marcus seem young. This was someone who remembered when the world was different, when empires that were now dust still carved out territories. His voice creaked like old leather. Lord Marcus, I came as soon as I heard. Samuel, thank you. Marcus's tone carried genuine warmth. I'd like you to meet James Mitchell and his daughter Claire. James, Claire, this is Samuel Whitmore, one of the oldest vampires in Shadow Valley, and someone I trust with my life. Samuel studied them both with unsettling intensity, his gaze lingering on Claire. A protector. I can feel the bond from here. 400 years and I never thought. He trailed off something like wonder crossing his ancient face. You knew protectors. I was raised by one. Her name was Catherine. She bonded to me when I was 8 years old, protected me until I was 16. She died so I could live.
We must protect the innocent
His
at
focus
all
shifted
costs.
to James. Aussie, you're military. I can tell from how you stand. Former Special Forces, 24 years. Which service? Army? Multiple deployments, mostly classified. I fought in 7 wars. Revolutionary 1812 Civil War. Both World Wars, Vietnam, Iraq. Samuel's expression held grim humor. I recognize soldiers. We carry ourselves the same way regardless of species or century. Something in James's chest loosened slightly at meeting someone who might actually understand Vietnam. What years? 1967 to 1969. mostly around Pleiku in the Central Highlands. My father was there, 101st Airborne. He died in 71. I knew men from the 101st, good soldiers, most of them. I'm sorry for your loss. Long time ago now, Samuel nodded slowly, then turned his attention back to Claire. I came to offer my services, training, teaching you what Catherine taught me about the bond, about your abilities. You'll
We
need
must
guidance if
protect
you're
the
going to
innocent
survive
at all
here.
costs.
Claire's voice came out uncertain. I don't have any abilities yet. Just some silver marks on my wrist. The marks are the beginning. The bond will grow stronger each day, unlocking power you don't know you have. Strength, speed, healing, intuition, all of it will manifest as you need it. But power without training is just danger to yourself and others. Let me help you channel it properly. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Because I owe a debt to Catherine and that 300 years haven't been enough to repay. Helping you honor her memory, preserve the tradition she died for, that's the least I can do. He glanced at James. And I'd like to work with you too if you're willing. Work how, teach you to fight us. You're going to be protecting your daughter in a world where every enemy is faster, stronger, and more experienced than you. I can't give you vampire abilities, but I can teach you strategies that work despite the disadvantage. James's interest sharpened. You'd teach me to fight your own kind. I'd teach a
We
father
must
to protect his
the
child.
innocent at all
That
costs.
transcends species loyalty. Samuel's expression went distant. Catherine did the same for me. Stood between me and those who wanted me dead, knowing she couldn't win doing it anyway because that's what protectors do. If I can help Claire avoid that fate, or at least delay it, I'll do whatever it takes. They talked logistics after that, training schedules, security protocols, what to expect from the council meeting. Samuel confirmed Thomas's warnings about resistance, about vampires who'd see Claire as threat rather than asset. But he also offered something Thomas hadn't hoped. The prophecy isn't absolute. Yes, most protectors died young, but not all. Margaret lived to 62. Catherine made it to 33. If you're smart, if you train properly, if you choose your battles instead of throwing yourself at every threat, you can survive. He looked at Claire directly. You can live a full life and die old by protective standards. It won't be easy, but it's possible. After Samuel left, promising to return at dawn for the first training session, James found
We
Marcus
must
standing on the
protect the
balcony
innocent at all
overlooking Night Haven.
costs.
The city glowed with crimson lanterns, thousands of them, creating an effect that should have been menacing, but somehow felt almost welcoming. Vampires moved through streets below their pale faces, tilted up occasionally toward the palace, toward where their king stood watching. James joined him at the railing. It's beautiful, in a gothic, might be the gates of hell kind of way. Marcus's lips twitched. Evelyn said something similar the first time she saw it. She was from the Southern Territories, warm climates and bright colors. This was like another world to her. How long were you married? 500 years give or take a decade. When you have eternity, sometimes you lose track of exact time. His voice roughened. Not long enough. Never long enough. I'm sorry for your loss. So am I, every moment of every day. He looked at James directly. I want you to understand something. I'm not asking you and Claire to do this blindly. I know the cost. I know what it might mean. If there was another
must
way,
protect
any
the
other way to
innocent
save
at all
Lily, I'd
costs.
take it. But there isn't. And I'm grateful more than I can express that you're both willing to try. Don't be grateful yet. Wait until we succeed. Fair enough, Marcus paused. The council meets tomorrow night. They're going to challenge Claire, test her, try to find ways to undermine the bond. I need you to understand, I'll defend her with everything I have, but there are rules even I have to follow. Political realities. If they demand certain concessions, certain tests, I might have to allow them. What kind of test? I don't know yet. Probably they'll want to verify the bond is real, not some trick. They might try to separate you, see if Lily suffers. They might demand Claire demonstrate her abilities, prove she's worth protecting. And if she can't, the bond's only 3 days old. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But James, I need you to trust me. Even when it looks like I'm letting them hurt her, even when I seem to be agreeing to things that endanger her trust, that I'm playing a longer game. I've navigated council politics for 800 years. I know how to give
We must
ground without
protect the
losing
innocent
position.
at all costs.
James considered that. I'll trust you until I can't, but the moment I think you're sacrificing her for politics, king or not, we're done. That's fair. I'd expect nothing less from a father. They stood in silence for a while, watching the city that would be Claire's home for however long she survived. James tried not to think about the prophecy about protectors dying young, about watching his daughter sacrifice herself for a vampire child he'd only known for 3 days. Tried and failed. Marcus spoke quietly. You're a good man, James Mitchell. Most humans wouldn't do what you're doing. Most humans haven't been soldiers, haven't learned that some things matter more than safety. Even so, thank you. For coming, for staying, for being the kind of father who follows his daughter into darkness. Where else would I be? They returned inside to find Claire sitting beside Lily's crib, watching the baby sleep. The silver marks on her wrist had spread slightly, the patterns more defined than they'd been this morning. The bond growing stronger, binding her fate to a child who'd chosen her
protect
for
the innocent
reasons
at all
neither
costs.
of them fully understood. James pulled up a chair beside his daughter. You doing okay, kiddo? Scared, excited, terrified, all of it at once. That's normal. I felt the same way my first deployment. How did you handle it? Focused on the mission, trusted my training, remembered why I was there. He put his hand over hers. You're not alone in this. Whatever comes, we face it together. Promise, sir. I've been making that same promise since you were 5 months old. Not about to stop now. Claire leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. What do you think the council will be like? Hostile, probably. They're going to see you as threat, as change they didn't ask for. But you've got Marcus on your side and Samuel and Thomas. That's not nothing. And you. And me. Always. They sat together while night deepened outside and Lily slept peacefully, oblivious to the politics swirling around her existence. Tomorrow would bring challenges, tests, confrontations with ancient vampires who had every reason to want Claire gone.
We must protect the innocent
But
at all
tonight
costs.
they had this moment, father and daughter making the best of an impossible situation, preparing for a future that promised only danger and uncertainty. James thought about his empty cabin back in Montana, about the hollow retirement he'd been enduring for 2 years. Thought about waking up every morning without purpose, without mission, without anyone needing him for anything that mattered. He'd trade every comfortable day for this terrifying one, because at least here he mattered. Claire needed him. Lily needed them both. That was enough. That was everything. Outside Nighthaven glowed in the darkness like a promise or a threat, and James Mitchell settled in to keep watch over the only family he had ever chosen in a world he'd never imagined existed, preparing for tomorrow's battle with the only weapons he'd ever really had. Loyalty, determination, and the absolute refusal to let anyone hurt the people he loved. The old soldier had found his last mission. Now he just had to survive it. Dawn broke cold over Nighthaven, the perpetual twilight brightening to something almost resembling morning.
We must
James had been
protect the
awake for
innocent
hours,
at
his
all
internal
costs.
clock refusing to adjust to a place where night never quite ended. He'd spent the time checking locks, testing exits, memorizing the layout of the Royal Wing, until he could navigate it blindfolded. Old habits from countries where knowing your escape routes meant the difference between extraction and body bag. Samuel appeared precisely at 5, his ancient frame moving with the kind of grace that made James recalculate every assumption about age and ability. The vampire carried 2 practice blades, wooden but weighted to match real weapons. His voice held dry amusement. You're punctual. Most humans need adjustment time after arriving here. 30 years of formation drills don't leave easy. Good. Habits keep you alive longer than talent ever will. Samuel handed over one of the blades. You know how to use a knife. I've used worse in worse places. Show me. The attack came without warning, Samuel moving with speed that turned him into a blur. James's reflexes kicked in purely on muscle memory, bringing up the wooden blade in a deflection that would have worked against any human opponent.
We must protect
Against
the
Samuel, it
innocent
did
at all
nothing.
costs.
The vampire flowed around the defense like water, disarmed James in 3 economical moves, and had the practice blade against his throat before James's conscious mind finished processing the engagement. You're trained, Samuel stepped back, resetting to ready position, but trained for human opponents. We're faster, stronger. We've been refining combat techniques since before your country existed. James's chest heaved with exertion from those 3 seconds. Point made. So how do I not die immediately? You learn to think differently. Speed isn't everything when strategy matters more. Samuel began circling his movements precise. We have weaknesses. Silver slows our healing, not fatal, but it hurts, makes us cautious. UV light in concentrated doses weakens us, drains our strength faster than anything else. Decapitation is the only guaranteed kill. Fire works but requires more time than most combat situations allow. And the arrogance you mentioned last night, that's your real weapon. Centuries of superiority breed assumptions. We expect humans to fight like humans, desperate, scared, predictable. You fight like a soldier who's adapted to asymmetric warfare, and suddenly our patterns don't work as well. They trained for 2 hours, Samuel demonstrating techniques that had nothing to do with matching strength. Redirect instead of block. Use momentum against the attacker. Strike joints and pressure points that hurt regardless of supernatural healing. Think 3 moves ahead because vampires relied on speed to overwhelm before strategy mattered. James absorbed it all through sweat and aching muscles that reminded him he was 56, not 26. Every movement hurt in ways he'd forgotten were possible. But pain meant learning, and learning meant survival. And survival meant protecting Claire when threats came calling. Again, Samuel's tone that allowed no quarter for age or exhaustion. I'm 56, not invincible. And you'll use that. Young fighters depend on physical capability. Old fighters depend on cunning. I'm human and you're 300
We
years
must
old.
protect the
How does that
innocent
give
at
me
all
advantage?
costs.
Because vampires fight by patterns. Centuries of learned behavior techniques, refined but also rigid. You fight by adaptation, by changing tactics every engagement. That unpredictability is what kept you alive in Special Forces. It'll keep you alive here too. Day 8 of training, 6 days after arriving in Nighthaven, brought the breakthrough. Samuel attacked with his usual impossible speed, and James finally stopped trying to match it. Instead, he watched footwork track the subtle weight shifts that preceded each strike, recognized the pattern Samuel's centuries had burned into instinct. Always led with left, always shifted, before striking, always assumed the opponent would try to block rather than evade. James waited for the next attack, let Samuel commit fully to the strike, then sidestepped at the last possible instant. He redirected the vampire's momentum. Rather than opposing it, used Samuel's own speed to send him crashing into the courtyard wall hard enough to crack stone. Silence. Then Samuel's laughter, genuine and delighted. Finally, you stopped fighting me and started fighting
We must
smart.
protect the innocent at
James
all
doubled
costs.
over, hands on knees, gasping. Felt good. Also felt like I might die. That's the price. You can't match our physical abilities, but you can outsmart us if you're willing to pay in exhaustion what we pay in arrogance. I'll take that trade. They continued drilling until James could execute the same maneuver consistently, until his body understood intellectually what his training had proven. Speed mattered less than reading your opponent, and reading opponents was something soldiers learned or died trying. Evenings brought different lessons. Marcus joined James on the terrace most nights, both men drawn to the city view and the silence that didn't require filling. Tonight they shared drinks, Marcus's wine from a vintage James's grandfather might have known James's whiskey that burned familiar on the way down. Marcus spoke without preamble. Samuel says you're learning quickly. For an old man with bad knees and declining reflexes. For any man, most humans can't adapt to fighting supernatural opponents. The gap is too wide, the psychology too different. Most
must
humans
protect
haven't
the
spent
innocent
careers
at
in
all
combat
costs.
zones where the enemy had every advantage except willingness to die for the mission. They sat in comfortable silence watching crimson lanterns illuminate streets below. James still wasn't sure what to make of Marcus Vampire King grieving father 800-year-old warrior who somehow reminded James of officers he'd served under. Men who carried responsibility like physical weight, who made decisions that cost lives and lived with the consequences. Can I ask you something? James finally broke the quiet. Yes. Why are you really letting me into your life, your daughter's life, your city's secrets? You barely know me. Marcus considered his wine glass. Because you remind me of someone who, myself, 500 years ago before I was king, I fought in the Crusades, carried a sword for lords who saw me as expendable. I understand duty service, the weight of protecting those who can't protect themselves. His silver eyes found James's. You and I were the same, just different centuries. I was never royalty.
We
Neither
must
was
protect the
I
innocent
was made
at all
vampire on a
costs.
battlefield, left for dead by humans and found by something older. Spent 2 centuries as common soldier before circumstances and survival made me more. He gestured at the city. All this, it's responsibility I never wanted and can't escape. Some days I envy you walking away from service when you chose building a life outside the chain of command. You think retirement's freedom? I spent 2 years in a cabin, wondering why I bothered waking up. And now I have purpose again. Daughter who needs me, mission that matters, enemies to plan against. I'll take dangerous purpose over safe emptiness every single day. Marcus's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. We're more alike than I thought. They talked until the hour turned late, and even vampires sought rest. James returned to his quarters feeling something unexpected connection. Not friendship exactly, but the recognition of one soldier by another across impossible divides of species and experience. They'd both seen too much lost, too much
We must
carried too
protect
much.
the innocent at
That
all
created
costs.
bonds different from, but no less real than blood. The 11th day brought Victoria. James was cataloging weapons in Marcus's armory when the knock interrupted his inventory. He opened the door to find a woman who radiated the kind of beauty that made humans forget to breathe. White blonde hair, ice blue eyes, features too perfect to be anything except supernatural. But her expression carried grief so profound it almost eclipsed the predatory grace. Her voice was silk over razors. James Mitchell, I'd like a word. Lady Victoria, I presume? You presume correctly. May I enter? Every instinct said no, but antagonizing council members before the official meeting seemed tactically stupid. James stepped aside, kept his hand near the silver blade he'd taken to carrying. Make it quick. I've got work. Victoria glided past him with movements that reminded him of stalking cats. She examined the armory with interest that seemed genuine rather than calculated. Preparing for war.
We
Preparing to
must
protect my
the
daughter.
innocent at all costs.
Admirable. Futile, but admirable. She turned to face him directly. I came to offer you something rare truth. I'm listening. Your daughter will die. The prophecy is absolute. Every protector in recorded history has died defending their charge. Young violently with nothing to show for their sacrifice, except a vampire who outlives them by centuries. James's jaw tightened. I've heard the statistics. Have you heard what it does to the fathers, the mothers, the families who watch their children march toward guaranteed death because some ancient magic decided their blood was useful? Victoria's composure cracked slightly. I lost my daughter this way, lost my sister, both to protector bonds, both dead before they lived full lives. Ooh, Marcus mentioned you had personal history with this. Personal history? That's sanitized language for watching everyone I love torn apart by a system that treats humans as expendable tools. She moved closer, her presence overwhelming in the small space. I'm not your enemy, James. I'm someone trying to save you from
We
pain
must
I
protect the
wouldn't
innocent
wish
at
on
all
anyone.
costs.
By killing Lily. By sending her somewhere she can bond with a vampire protector. Different magic, different outcome. Your daughter lives. Lily lives. Everyone wins except the traditionalists who think blood purity matters more than survival. Marcus said that won't work. Marcus is desperate. Desperate people lie, rationalize, convince themselves their preferred solution is the only solution. Victoria's voice gentled. I understand his position. I understand Claire's compassion. I even understand your loyalty, but understanding doesn't change reality. If you let this bond complete, you're sentencing your daughter to death. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but soon. Too soon. James studied her, saw genuine pain beneath the political maneuvering. You really believe you're helping? I know I'm helping. I've lived this nightmare. You haven't, yet. So what do you want from me? Convince Claire to leave. Tonight, tomorrow, before the bond becomes permanent.
We must
I'll arrange
protect the
transport,
innocent at
set
all
up a
costs.
new identity, give her resources to start over anywhere she wants. Lily will suffer, but might survive with intensive care and time. It's not perfect, but it's better than watching your daughter die in 10 years, protecting a child who isn't even human. For a moment, James let himself imagine it. Claire safe living a normal life, maybe finding love and having children who wouldn't be bound by ancient prophecies. Growing old naturally instead of dying young violently. It was tempting in the way all easy solutions were tempting, offering comfort without addressing the core problem. No, Victoria's eyes flashed. You'd choose a vampire child over your own daughter. I'd choose letting Claire make her own decisions over forcing mine on her. I raised her to be strong, independent, capable of choosing her own path. Can't protect her from every danger just because it scares me. This isn't danger, this is certainty. Life's full of certainties. We all die eventually. Question isn't when, but whether it meant something.
We
James
must
crossed
protect
his
the
arms.
innocent at all
Claire's
costs.
decided this means something. I support that decision, even though it terrifies me. You're condemning her. I'm respecting her. There's a difference you don't seem to understand. Victoria's facade cracked further, revealing raw grief underneath the political sophistication. You'll watch her die. You'll see that light go out of her eyes, feel her go cold in your arms, and know you could have prevented it. That's not respect. That's cowardice dressed as principle. Maybe, or maybe it's understanding that some things matter more than survival. Like choice dignity and dying for something that actually meant something instead of living empty because you were too afraid to matter. They stared at each other across the armory. Two people who'd both lost too much, reaching opposite conclusions about what losing more would cost. Finally, Victoria moved toward the door, her movement stiff with controlled fury. She paused at the threshold. When she dies, and she will die, remember I tried to save you both from this. After she left, James stood alone among weapons designed to kill vampires.
We must
His
protect
hands
the
shaking
innocent
with
at all
reaction he'd
costs.
suppressed during the confrontation. Victoria had struck deep because she was right about the core fear he would watch Claire die, probably sooner than he wanted to imagine, definitely more violently than he could prevent. Every protective instinct screamed to grab his daughter and run to find that cabin in Montana and pretend the last 2 weeks had been nightmare instead of reality. But Claire had chosen this. Claire had made peace with the cost. And James had spent 23 years teaching her that mattering was more important than safety. He couldn't betray that lesson now just because it hurt him to follow it. That night, restless from the conversation with Victoria, James walked the palace corridors during hours when even vampires mostly slept. He'd learned the rhythms of this place over 2 weeks. Guards changed. At midnight, servants began preparations at 4. The council members kept irregular hours, but tended toward isolation in their private wings. He was passing a rarely used meeting room when voices drifted through the partially open door. Low, urgent, speaking English, rather than whatever language vampires
We must
defaulted to in
protect the
private.
innocent at all
James
costs.
froze his training, kicking in. He should walk away, mind his own business, not eavesdrop on conversations between council members. But one voice belonged to Victoria and the other to Lord Edmund, a council member who'd been conspicuously silent during the few interactions James had witnessed. He pressed himself against the wall, listening. Edmund's voice carried calculation. The festival is the perfect opportunity. Marcus will be distracted, presenting the girl formally. Everyone will be watching the ceremony. And the human, the father? Victoria's question sounded rhetorical. Mitchell's competent, but ultimately human. 50 guards can neutralize him quickly. No killing Marcus would never forgive that level of betrayal, just detained until it's over. You're certain your people will follow through. 30 are mine completely. 20 more will follow majority rule once they see the tide turn. We'll have overwhelming numbers. And after what happens to the girl and child? Separated. The girl leaves Night Haven for her own safety and ours.
We must
the child
protect
gets
the
proper
innocent at
vampire
all
care
costs.
without human influence. Marcus will be furious initially, but he'll see reason once Lily starts thriving without the protector bond draining her development. He'll resist, you know he will. Then we remove him, temporarily, for the kingdom's good. 6 months in comfortable exile while a Regency Council handles day-to-day governance. When he returns, everything will be stable, and he'll thank us for making the hard choice he couldn't. Victoria's silence stretched long enough that James thought she might object, might draw a line she wouldn't cross. Then she sighed with the weight of centuries behind it. It has to be clean. No casualties among his loyal guards. We remove the threat without creating a blood feud that tears the kingdom apart. Agreed. This isn't assassination. It's intervention. They discussed logistics after that timing guard rotations, who could be trusted to participate versus who needed to be kept ignorant. James absorbed every detail, his mind automatically organizing the intelligence the way he'd been trained. 50 conspirators more if the uncommitted followed momentum.
We must protect the
Festival
innocent
is
at all
covered.
costs.
Goal was separation and forced exile, not murder, which meant they try to control the situation with overwhelming numbers rather than immediate violence. It was a coup. Bloodless maybe, but still a coup. James slipped away when the conversation turned to minutiae. He didn't need his thoughts racing through implications and obligations. He should tell Marcus, immediately expose the conspiracy, let the king handle his own counsel's betrayal. That was the smart play, the politically safe choice that kept James out of vampire power struggles. But Victoria's words echoed in his memory about protectors dying, about fathers watching daughters sacrifice themselves for causes that didn't deserve the cost. What if she was right? What if the coup, morally wrong and politically treasonous, was actually the merciful option? Claire removed from danger. Lily alive, if not thriving. Everyone surviving, even if nobody was particularly happy. James stood in the darkness of the corridor, caught between duty and doubt, between loyalty to Marcus and protection of Claire.
We must
His entire
protect the
career
innocent
had been
at all
built on
costs.
following orders, supporting command, trusting the chain that kept chaos at bay. But he'd also spent 23 years putting Claire first, making decisions based on what she needed rather than what policy dictated. The choice crystallized with painful clarity. Victoria was wrong about what Claire needed. Safety without purpose was prison, not salvation. But she wasn't wrong about the danger being real. The answer wasn't to avoid the danger. It was to prepare for it so thoroughly that when threats came, they broke against readiness instead of surprise. And you couldn't prepare for threats you didn't see coming. James found Marcus in his study, surrounded by documents that looked ancient enough to crumble. The Vampire King glanced up, read something in James' expression, and set aside whatever he had been reading. Tell me. James laid out everything: Victoria's visit, the overheard conspiracy, the festival coup plan. Marcus listened without interruption, his face going progressively harder until it could have been carved from the same stone as his palace. When James finished, Marcus stood and paced to the window.
We must protect
50
the
guards,
innocent at all
a third
costs.
of my security force. At least. Edmund implied there were more who'd follow momentum once the coup started. Victoria was my closest ally, Evelyn's best friend, the person I trusted to speak hard truths when everyone else told me what I wanted to hear. She thinks she's saving you, and maybe the kingdom. She's wrong, but she believes it. Marcus's laugh was bitter. 3 centuries of friendship trumped by fear. I shouldn't be surprised. Fear makes people do terrible things while convincing themselves it's necessary. So what do we do? Cancel the festival? Can't. It's been announced, invitations sent. Canceling shows weakness, suggests I'm afraid of my own counsel. That invites challenges from outside territories who will see instability and opportunity. Then we prepare. Let them come, meet them ready. They'll have 50 guards. I'll have, 20 loyalists. The math doesn't work in our favor. James's tactical mind had already been working the problem. Numbers matter less than positioning. If we know they're coming, we control where the
We must
confrontation
protect the
happens.
innocent at all
Funnel them
costs.
into spaces where they can't use full numbers effectively. And we make sure Claire and Lily are somewhere secure before it starts, so the whole point of their coup becomes moot. Marcus turned from the window, something like hope flickering across his ancient face. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about security since we arrived. Comes with the territory. James moved to Marcus's desk, pulled out a palace map. The festival is here in the Eastern Gardens. Lot of space, multiple exits, hard to control. But if we position loyal guards at key choke points, if we have extraction routes planned for Claire and Lily, if we're ready to move the instant it starts, we turn their coup into our victory. They planned until dawn, lightened the perpetual twilight outside, mapping contingencies and backup plans for the backup plans. Marcus contributed knowledge of his guards, who could be trusted absolutely versus who might waver when pressure came. James contributed tactical experience from securing high-value targets in hostile territory, turning defensive positions into advantages,
We must
making
protect the
small
innocent
numbers
at
count
all
through positioning
costs.
and preparation. By the time they finished, James felt the bone-deep exhaustion that came from adrenaline crash after extended planning. But they had a strategy, not perfect, not guaranteed, but better than walking blind into a situation designed to separate Claire from Lily. Marcus clasped James's shoulder, the first physical contact between them, That wasn't professional necessity. Thank you for the warning, for the help, for standing with us when walking away would be easier and safer. Where else would I be? Most humans would be anywhere except here. I'm not most humans. I'm a soldier who found his last mission. James met Marcus's eyes. And I don't quit missions just because they get hard. The days blurred together after that preparation, consuming every waking hour. Samuel intensified training, pushing James through scenarios where he had to protect Claire against multiple attackers, had to make split-second decisions about retreat versus stand. Claire trained separately, learning to channel the power growing inside her to create the barriers that were a protector's signature ability.
We must protect
On
the
day
innocent
14,
at all
the day before the
costs.
festival, they made a supply run to Denver. Marcus insisted it was necessary, needed to pick up specialized equipment his guards couldn't procure locally. James insisted on calming his paranoia, screaming that leaving the palace meant vulnerability. They compromised by taking a 4-vehicle convoy with Julie and Sophia and 10 of Marcus's most trusted guards. The drive south passed in tense silence, everyone aware they were exposed during travel, everyone watching for threats that might materialize from forest or roadside. Claire sat beside Lily in the 3rd vehicle, close enough for the bond to stay comfortable, far enough from James that his protective instincts itched with wrongness. They were halfway across the Clearwater River Bridge when James's senses screamed danger. "Stop the convoy!" His tone cut through radio chatter with command authority that got instant compliance. Marcus's voice crackled back. "What's wrong?" "Don't know yet, but something is." "Everyone hold position." James was out of the lead vehicle in seconds, his eyes scanning the
We must
bridge,
protect the
approaches the
innocent
tree
at all
line, the
costs.
river below. Everything looked normal. Empty road, afternoon light, water rushing over rocks. Nothing obviously wrong except for the feeling in his gut that had kept him alive in countries where ignoring that feeling meant body bags. "I don't see anything," Julian said quietly, but his hand was on his weapon. "It's there, give me a second." Then he saw tire tracks on the bridge approach, fresh enough that gravel was still settling, positioned wrong for normal traffic. Someone had pulled off, backed up, repositioned recently. And the birds had gone silent in the trees, that absence of sound that meant predators were close. Ambush, reverse the ambush. The explosion cut off his warning, the lead vehicle detonating with force that sent shrapnel flying and James diving for cover. He came up with pistol drawn, loaded with silver rounds Marcus had provided, just as hunters emerged from the tree line on both sides. 20, maybe more, armed with crossbows and silver weapons that meant they knew exactly what they were hunting. "Claire," James's shout carried over the chaos. "Stay in the vehicle, protect Lily."
We must protect
He
the
didn't wait
innocent
for
at all
acknowledgement,
costs.
just moved toward the hunters coming from the north side, firing with precision, born from decades of practice. 2 shots, 2 hunters down before the rest scattered for cover. More explosions behind him suggested the convoy was taking serious fire, but James couldn't afford to look, couldn't divide his attention. 3 hunters broke from the tree line, charging his position with silver blades. James waited until they committed fully, then moved using Samuel's training. Sidestep, redirect, use momentum against attackers who expected him to panic or freeze. The first hunter went past him, James's blade opening a line across his back. The second he tripped, sending the man sprawling. The third got inside his guard blade, cutting across James's shoulder before he could react. Pain exploded white hot, but James had been cut before shot, before knew how to fight through it. He reversed his grip on the pistol, used it as a club to break the hunter's wrist, then put 2 rounds center mass when the man stumbled back. Silver bullets meant the hunter went down and stayed down, gasping with agony that normal rounds wouldn't have caused.
We must protect
More
the
hunters were
innocent
pushing
at all
forward,
costs.
drawn by the smell of blood and the chaos of combat. James fell back toward Marcus's vehicle, providing covering fire, while his tactical mind cataloged the disaster unfolding. They were outnumbered, outgunned, caught in a kill zone designed by someone who understood ambush tactics. His shoulder burned where the silver blade had cut, and he could feel blood soaking his shirt despite the shallowness of the wound. Then light erupted from the convoy's center. Claire's scream became power, a dome of silver brilliance expanding from where she held Lily, covering a 30-foot radius and catching hunters who'd gotten too close. They didn't just stop, they were thrown back by the barrier, like they'd touched live electrical wires, their screams confirming it hurt more than just physically. James had seen plenty of strange things during his military career, classified experiments, an unexplained phenomenon that officially didn't exist. But watching his daughter manifest magic that turned air solid and threw grown men like ragdolls, that was new. That was impossible, made real ancient power awakening in someone
We
who
must
2 weeks
protect
ago
the
had been
innocent
serving
at all
eggs
costs.
in a Montana diner. The barrier bought them seconds, maybe a minute. Marcus exploded into motion on the far side, his vampire speed turning him into a blur as he tore through hunters with the kind of violence that reminded James exactly what his allies were. Not human, not safe, just aligned by circumstance and shared purpose. Julian and Sophia joined the counterattack, 3 vampires moving in perfect coordination against opponents who'd planned for human targets and found themselves overmatched. In 5 minutes it was over. Half the hunters down, the rest fleeing into forest. The convoy damaged but functional guards wounded but alive. James's shoulder screamed with pain that was getting worse instead of better. Silver poisoning spreading through his system in ways that proved he was human facing supernatural threats. Claire's barrier flickered and collapsed, exhaustion written across her face as she sagged against the vehicle. Lily was crying, but unhurt, more scared by the chaos than actually endangered. Marcus appeared at James's side, his clothes splattered with blood that wasn't his own, his expression grim.
We must
You're injured.
protect the innocent
I'm
at all
functional.
costs.
How bad's the damage? 2 vehicles totaled, 4 guards need immediate medical attention, 1 dead. Marcus's jaw tightened, and they knew we'd be here. Someone told them our route, our timing, this was coordinated. James's brain, even fuzzy with pain and adrenaline crash, made the connection. Victoria's people, the coup's already started. They're just not waiting for the festival. They limped back to Nighthaven with James's wound wrapped in makeshift bandages that did nothing for the burning sensation spreading up his arm. Samuel met them at the palace gates, took one look at the injury, and hustled James to what passed for a medical facility in a vampire city. The doctor vampire naturally cleaned and stitched with efficiency that suggested extensive experience with silver wounds. You'll live, she said flatly, but Silver's a bastard. Burns worse than anything human, takes longer to heal even for your kind. You'll be at half capacity for days. Can't afford half capacity. Festival's tomorrow. Then I suggest you find someone to watch your back because you're not watching anyone
protect
else's
the innocent
until
at
this
all
heals
costs.
properly. James spent the next 6 hours sleeping restlessly, his dreams full of fire, and Claire's face disappearing behind impossible light. When he woke, evening had fallen and Marcus was waiting with news. We interrogated one of the hunters who survived. He confirmed what we suspected, hired by someone inside Nighthaven. Given our travel route and timing, paid to capture or kill Claire, doesn't matter which, as long as Lily ends up separated from her protector. So the festival's just one front. They're hitting us everywhere they can. Looks that way. Marcus's expression was grim. I've moved the festival up by 6 hours. If they're expecting evening, we'll hold it at twilight. Throw off their timing, force them to react before they're fully positioned. That's a gamble. Everything's a gamble now. But I'd rather gamble on our terms than theirs. Festival day arrived with James's shoulder still burning and his mobility limited. Samuel appeared at dawn with weapons, a lighter blade balanced for his injured side, backup knives
We must
positioned for
protect the
left-hand
innocent
draw,
at all
and a
costs.
device that looked like a modified grenade but smaller. UV flashbang, concentrated daylight in a 3-second burst. Won't kill us, but it'll hurt, blind us temporarily, give you opening if things go wrong. James tested the weight. Where do you even get these? Made them myself. 300 years gives you time to develop hobbies. Samuel's expression turned serious. You're injured. You should sit this out. Not happening. Stubborn. Practical. Claire needs backup and half capacity. James is still better than no James. Fair point. The festival preparations happened in compressed chaos, servants rushing to ready the gardens for an event moved forward by hours. James positioned himself near the main entrance, cataloging faces, identifying potential threats in a sea of vampire nobility who all looked vaguely predatory. Claire stayed close to Marcus, Lily in her arms, both of them dressed in formal wear that made them look like they belonged in a Renaissance painting. Gardens filled with nobles, their pale faces turned upward
We
toward where
must
Marcus
protect
stood
the
on the
innocent
raised
at all
platform.
costs.
Crimson lanterns floated overhead, creating atmosphere that should have been romantic if James hadn't been watching for the coup that was definitely coming. He'd positioned Samuel and the 3 guards he trusted absolutely at key choke points, turning the open space into something resembling a defensive position. Victoria arrived fashionably late, her ice blue gown attracting attention from everyone except James, who was watching her guards instead. 10 of them positioned wrong for protection, right for assault. Edmund followed minutes later with another 15, and suddenly James was counting 30 hostiles in a space designed for celebration. The math was bad and getting worse. Marcus began speaking, his voice carrying without artificial amplification, explaining the protector bond and Claire's role in the historical significance of this moment. James barely heard it. His attention focused on Victoria's guards edging closer to the platform, on Edmund's people shifting positions to block exits. Claire's hand found his, her voice quiet. Something's wrong. I can feel it.
We must protect the
Stay close
innocent
to
at
me.
all
When
costs.
I say move, you move. Don't argue, don't hesitate. Dad, the first explosion hit the South Tower close enough that the sound rolled across the gardens like thunder. Nobles screamed and scattered as more detonations followed North Wing, East Gate, West Courtyard. Marcus's eyes found James's across the chaos, confirming what they'd both known was coming. The coup wasn't subtle. It was chaos and overwhelming force designed to create confusion and fear. Victoria's voice cut through the panic, amplified somehow. Marcus Thorne, you are relieved of command, council authority, is enacted for the kingdom's protection. Guards appeared from everywhere, 50 or more, all wearing matching armbands that marked them as coup participants. They surrounded the platform in coordinated movement that proved someone had been drilling them, preparing them for exactly this. Marcus's loyalists tried to form defensive positions, but were outnumbered and overwhelmed before they could organize effectively. James grabbed Claire's arm. Tunnels, now. They ran for the palace entrance, James's
We
injured
must
shoulder
protect the
screaming
innocent
with
at
every
all
movement.
costs.
Behind them, Victoria's voice continued declaring justifications and legal authorities that meant nothing except as cover for treason. Guards blocked their path, but James had the UV flashbang in his left hand, triggered it without warning. Light exploded artificial sun in concentrated form, and the vampires blocking the entrance screamed and fell back, their hands over eyes that couldn't process the intensity. James pushed through with Claire and Lily moving as fast as his injury allowed toward the nursery and the escape tunnels Marcus had shown him 2 weeks ago. But more guards were coming, pouring through corridors with the kind of numbers that said, this was planned, coordinated, unstoppable. James could fight 5, maybe 10, if he was lucky, and they were stupid. 50 was suicide. They reached the nursery just as guards filled the corridor behind them. James slammed the door, threw the bolt that wouldn't hold for long, and turned to find the tunnel entrance. Claire was already there, the bookshelf pulled aside to reveal darkness that promised escape or just a different kind of trap. Lily was
must
screaming,
protect the
terrified by
innocent
the
at all
violence and
costs.
Kate, and Claire was trying to soothe her while simultaneously preparing to run. James checked his pistol, 4 rounds left, not nearly enough, and made peace with the fact that he probably wasn't walking out of this. Go, he told Claire. Follow the tunnel north. Denver's safe house address is in your pocket. Don't look back, don't wait for me. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are, that's an order. He cupped her face with his good hand. I didn't raise you to watch me die. I raised you to survive, so survive. Tears streamed down her face. Dad, go now before they break through. The door shuddered with impact, guards hitting it with force that would splinter it in seconds. Claire looked at him one last time, memorizing his face the way children did when they knew goodbye was permanent. Then she turned and ran into darkness with Lily clutched tight against her chest. James faced the door, pistol raised, shoulder burning, and smiled with the grim satisfaction that came from knowing he'd bought them time. Not much, maybe 30 seconds if he fought smart. But 30 seconds could mean escape, could
We
mean
must
Claire
protect
lived,
the
could
innocent
mean
at
this whole
all
insane
costs.
mission wasn't complete failure. The door exploded inward. Guards poured through the shattered doorway with the kind of coordination that proved someone had trained them well. James fired twice, dropping the first 2, then dove behind the overturned crib as return fire splintered wood around him. His tactical mind ran calculations, 4 guards visible, probably more in the corridor, 2 rounds left in his pistol, injured shoulder, limiting mobility. The math said he had maybe 15 seconds before they overwhelmed him through sheer numbers. He was preparing for the rush when a figure materialized from the side tunnel entrance, moving with speed that blurred human perception. Samuel Whitmore crashed into the guards like a wrecking ball wrapped in ancient fury, his 300-year-old frame suddenly demonstrating why age meant experience, not weakness. The lead guard went down with a broken neck before his brain processed the attack. The second lost his weapon and several teeth. The third managed half a scream before Samuel's hand closed around his throat. Not today, old friend. Samuel's voice carried grim satisfaction as he positioned himself between James and the remaining guards. You want Mitchell, you go through me first. More vampires flooded the doorway. Victoria's people, Edmund's conspirators, faces James had memorized during 2 weeks of surveillance. They hesitated when they saw Samuel recognition warring with orders. This wasn't some human security chief they could dismiss. This was an elder someone who'd fought in wars before their grandparents were born, whose reputation made even coup plotters reconsider their life choices. One guard found courage or stupidity. Stand down, Samuel, council authority. The council can burn in sunlight for all I care. Samuel's eyes went flat in a way that promised violence. I've served kings for 3 centuries. I know treason when I see it. Victoria's voice echoed from the corridor. You'd betray the council for humans, for a bond that shouldn't exist. I'd honor a soldier willing to die for what's right, something you've forgotten in your centuries of comfortable politics. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats tension,
We must
thick enough to
protect the
choke
innocent
on.
at all
Then
costs.
Samuel moved again, not attacking, but retreating, grabbed at James by his good arm, and hauled him toward the tunnel entrance with strength that didn't care about human weight or injured shoulders. Move, Claire needs backup more than I need your corpse. They ran through darkness that smelled of stone and centuries James's lungs burning as he pushed past pain and exhaustion. Behind them, pursuit crashed and shouted, but the tunnel's narrowness made numbers irrelevant. Samuel held the rear guard position, his presence alone enough to slow vampires who understood what fighting an elder in confined spaces would cost them. The tunnel twisted through rock for what felt like miles, but was probably less emerging into a garage James hadn't known existed. A vehicle weighted reinforced SUV with keys in the ignition, supplies in the back, everything staged for emergency extraction. Marcus had planned well. Samuel shoved James toward the driver's seat. Go Denver safe house address should be programmed in the GPS. What about you, Bobs? I'm buying time. Samuel's grin was feral. Go
We
protect
must
your daughter.
protect the
That's what
innocent at
soldiers
all
do.
costs.
James didn't argue, just gunned in the engine and crashed through the garage's exterior door into night that was finally full dark. The GPS showed 30 miles to Denver, to the safe house Marcus had mentioned in contingency planning. 30 miles with coup forces probably already mobilizing with Victoria's people, searching with every second, counting against Claire's head start. He pushed the SUV to speeds that would have been reckless on clear roads, borderline suicidal on mountain passes at night. But James had driven worse in worse conditions, and the alternative was arriving too late to matter. His shoulder screamed protest with every gear shift, blood seeping through makeshift bandages Samuel had applied during their brief run through the tunnels. The safe house materialized from darkness, craftsman-style home, in a neighborhood that looked aggressively normal, complete with lawn decorations and a basketball hoop. James parked 2 blocks away on instinct, approached on foot, with his remaining ammunition and Samuel's blade. Every house looked quiet, peaceful, nothing suggesting vampire conspiracies
We
or
must protect the
supernatural
innocent
danger.
at all costs.
Except his instincts were screaming again. He circled the safe house twice, cataloging approaches and sight lines before spotting what was wrong. The door sat slightly ajar, interior lights off when they should have been on, and a vehicle he didn't recognize parked in the adjacent alley. Claire wouldn't have left the door open, wouldn't have already stayed in darkness with a terrified baby, which meant either she wasn't here or she wasn't alone. James approached from the back, using shadows and the kind of patience that had kept him breathing in hostile territory. Through a window he caught movement, Claire and Lily huddled in what looked like a basement entrance, blocked by 3 vampires who'd clearly arrived before them. The math clicked into horrible clarity. Victoria's people had been smart enough to send advance teams to known safe houses, cutting off escape routes before refugees could reach them. One vampire leaned close to Claire, his voice carrying through the broken window. Just give us the child. No one needs to get hurt. Go to hell. Claire's tone was pure defiance mixed with terror. The bond isn't complete.
We must protect
Break
the
it now
innocent
and
at
you
all
survive.
costs.
The princess gets proper care from her own kind. Everyone wins. Everyone except Lily, who'd be traumatized by forced separation. Everyone except me, who'd spend the rest of my life knowing I abandoned a baby who trusted me. So no, not happening. The vampire's patience cracked. Then we take her by force. He lunged forward just as James crashed through the window in an explosion of glass and momentum. His blade found the vampire's shoulder, silver cutting, deep enough to hurt to slow healing, before the other two realized they had company. James followed through with an elbow to one's face and used the confined space against them the way Samuel had taught. Narrow corridors meant they couldn't surround him, couldn't use numbers effectively. But 3 vampires were still. 3 vampires, and James was human injured, running on adrenaline and stubbornness. He got in good hits, opened wounds that would slow them down, bought Claire time to retreat further into the basement. But they adapted, learned his patterns, started working as a unit instead of individuals. The lead vampire caught James's wrist, twisted until bone ground against bone, and the blade clattered to floor. A fist crashed into his injured shoulder with force that whited out vision, sent him stumbling against the wall. He tasted copper, felt ribs protest impacts that probably cracked at least one. Should have stayed in Montana, old man. The vampire's hand closed around James's throat. Now you die for nothing. Then light erupted from the basement, pure and terrible and beautiful. Claire's scream became power for the second time in one day, but this was different from the bridge. This was massive, a dome that expanded through the entire house, catching all 3 vampires and James in its radius. The pressure didn't hurt. James felt warm, instead safe, protective. But the vampires screamed like they were burning their skin, smoking where the light touched. James fell as the hand released his throat, gasping for air, while the barrier pulsed with Claire's desperation and fury. The vampires tried to flee, but the light followed them relentless until they collapsed, whimpering in corners. Through the brilliance, James could see patterns forming the same silver script that marked Claire's wrist, now floating through the air like living calligraphy. And everywhere the light touched it, revealed something impossible. The vampires weren't just hurt, they were marked. Glowing crimson from within their bodies lit up like they'd swallowed fire, making their intentions visible to anyone who could see. Claire's voice came distant, like she was speaking from the other side of a canyon. Traitors, they glow red. Everyone who betrayed Marcus, everyone who supported the coup, they're all marked now. The barrier flickered and collapsed, exhaustion taking Claire to her knees. But the marks remained, the 3 vampires still glowing faintly crimson, even as they struggled to their feet. James hauled himself upright, through pain that suggested several new injuries, grabbed his fallen blade, and positioned himself between the vampires and Claire. You can leave walking, or you leave bleeding. Choose fast. They chose walking, stumbling out through the broken window into night that suddenly seemed safer than staying near a protector who could do that.
We must protect
James
the
waited
innocent
until
at
they
all
disappeared
costs.
before letting himself collapse against the wall, every part of his body screaming protest. Claire crawled over Lily, clutching tight. Dad, oh God, you're hurt. I'm breathing, that's what counts. He managed a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. That light thing, that was new. I didn't know I could do that. It just happened. When they threatened Lily, when they hurt you, something broke open inside and the power just came. Protector magic. Apparently it includes making bad guys glow red. James checked his injuries with hands that shook from adrenaline crash. We need to move. More will come. Where the safe house is compromised. Back to Night Haven, it's the only place Marcus can actually protect us. But the coup, your magic just gave us an advantage they can't counter. You mark the traitors. Everyone who sees them will know exactly who supported Victoria. That changes everything. They took the SUV despite James's injuries, making him a questionable driver. Claire couldn't drive stick shift, and navigating while holding a baby seemed suboptimal. They limped back north through mountains that felt longer in the dark, James fighting to stay conscious, while his body tried to shut down from accumulated damage. Dawn was threatening when they finally reached Night Haven's gates. The city looked like a war zone, scorch marks on towers, debris. In streets, guards everywhere wearing expressions that suggested the night had been long and violent for everyone involved. But the gates opened when they approached, and Julian was there with Sophia, both looking relieved to see them alive. Lord Marcus is in the throne room, Julian said shortly. The coup collapsed after you escaped. Lady Victoria tried to rally support, but when word spread that you'd marked the traitors somehow, he shrugged. Hard to maintain conspiracy when everyone can see who's involved. They found Marcus standing among the wreckage of what had been a carefully planned festival. Nobles clustered in groups, whispering and pointing at certain individuals who glowed faint crimson even in daylight. Victoria stood isolated near the platform, her ice blue dress torn and stained her expression, carrying the weight of failure and acceptance.
We must protect the innocent
When she saw
at
Claire,
all
something
costs.
crossed her face, regret, maybe, or recognition that she'd underestimated what a protector could actually do. Marcus descended from the platform, his clothes still splattered with blood from whatever fighting had happened during the night. His silver eyes found James and Claire, and relief transformed his face from king to father in an instant. "You're alive." "Barely," James admitted, "but functional. I am your wildest time at the tunnels, haven't seen him since. He's here, wounded but recovering." Marcus looked at Claire, at Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms despite everything. "Your magic, we felt it from here." A pulse that spread through the city, marking everyone involved in the conspiracy. 43 vampires total, all glowing like they'd been branded. Victoria's support evaporated the moment people realized their neighbors were traitors. Claire's voice came out small. "I didn't mean to do that. It just happened." You revealed truth. That's what protectors have always done. Not just shield from physical danger, but expose lies and moral corruption.
We
It's
must
why they were
protect
feared,
the innocent
why
at
they were
all
killed.
costs.
Marcus's tone gentle. "And why you're invaluable now. No one can hide their intentions from you. No one can plot in darkness when you can literally make them glow with guilt." Victoria stepped forward, her movements careful. "I surrender. Formally. No more resistance, no more plotting. You've won." "Have I?" Marcus's question held genuine curiosity. "Because it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like watching an old friend destroy herself from fear. I was trying to save you. Save your daughter. Save the kingdom from repeating mistakes that cost me everything." "I know. That's what makes this tragedy instead of just treason." The throne room filled over the next hours as word spread that the coup had failed, that the king still ruled, that justice would be administered to those who'd betrayed their oaths. James spent the time getting medical treatment from a doctor who seemed unsurprised by the amount of damage one human had accumulated. Cracked ribs, silver poisoning, spreading up his arm, various cuts and contusions that would hurt for weeks. "You should be dead,"
We
the
must
doctor said
protect
flatly.
the innocent at all
"Most humans
costs.
wouldn't survive half this damage. I'm stubborn. You're lucky, and you won't be functional for at least 3 days. That shoulder needs complete rest, or the silver will spread to your heart, and then lucky won't matter." James endured the lecture because arguing took energy he didn't have. Claire sat beside him through the treatment, Lily sleeping in her lap, both of them radiating exhaustion that went beyond physical. They'd survived, but survival had cost something neither could quite name yet. 3 days later, healed enough to stand without swaying, James attended the trials in the throne room. All 43 conspirators lined up to face judgment, Victoria at their head because she'd been the architect even if Edmund had provided muscle. Marcus presided from his throne, looking every inch the ancient king who'd seen empires rise and fall. Harrison, the elder council member who'd stayed neutral, spoke the charges. Treason, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, assault on royal persons, destruction of palace property, attempted murder of the king's appointed protector. He looked at Victoria.
We
"How do
must
you plead?"
protect the innocent
"Guilty
at all
to
costs.
all of it." Her voice carried no defiance, just exhausted acceptance. "I did what I thought was necessary to save this kingdom from repeating my family's tragedy. I was wrong. The cost is mine to pay. Sentence is death, execution at dawn." Before Marcus could confirm, James stood from where he'd been sitting with Claire. His movement sent pain radiating through barely healed injuries, but some things mattered more than comfort. "Your Majesty, I'd like to speak." Marcus studied him with something like resignation. "You don't have to do this. I want to." The throne room went quiet as James approached the center, facing the assembled vampires with the kind of presence that came from speaking to soldiers before battles. He'd given death notifications to families' eulogy for fallen friends, briefings before missions that wouldn't bring everyone home. This was just another kind of speech, another kind of war. Lady Victoria lost her daughter, lost her sister, both to protector bonds that ended in death and grief. She acted from trauma,
We
not
must
malice.
protect the innocent
I've
at
seen
all
soldiers
costs.
with PTSD make terrible choices, not because they're evil, but because pain breaks something inside that doesn't heal right. He turned to face Victoria directly. You're wrong about protectors, wrong about Claire, wrong about Lily. But you're not evil. You're a mother who lost everything and couldn't bear to watch it happen to someone else. Victoria's composure cracked, tears streaming down her face. I tried to kill your daughter. You tried to save her. Misguided, illegal, destructive, but motivated by mercy as you understood it. That's not the same as murder for pleasure or power. James addressed the full court. I'm 56 years old. I've served 24 years in the military, seen combat in a dozen countries, made decisions that cost lives, including people I cared about. I've learned that punishment without understanding solves nothing. It just creates more trauma, more pain, more broken people making broken choices. Victoria's crimes are real, but killing her won't undo them. Won't
We
bring
must
back the
protect
dead.
the innocent at
Won't
all
heal the
costs.
kingdom's divisions. His voice strengthened. Exile gives her chance to find peace, maybe even redemption. Death just adds another body to a count that's already too high. Harrison spoke carefully. You're asking mercy for someone who tried to murder you and separate your daughter from her charge. I'm asking wisdom instead of vengeance, because that's what separates us from the monsters we fight, choosing mercy when anger would be easier. Marcus stood descended from the throne, approached Victoria where she stood among the condemned. For a long moment, he just looked at her, centuries of friendship warring with fresh betrayal. 500 years you served beside me, advised me, challenged me when I needed challenging. You were Evelyn's closest friend, the person who knew my wife better than anyone except me. His voice was rough. That's the Victoria I remember, not the traitor who tried to destroy my family. I'm sorry. Victoria's voice broke completely. I'm so sorry for
We must
everything,
protect the innocent
for
at all
betraying you,
costs.
for endangering Lily, for I know. And because I know, because I understand the pain that drove you, I'm choosing mercy. Marcus addressed the court. Lady Victoria Ashwood is hereby exiled. 50 years. Cannot return to Nighthaven or any Thorn territory. If she does, death sentence stands. Victoria collapsed, sobbing with relief and grief both. Guards helped her to her feet, led her away to prepare for exile that would last half a human lifetime. The other conspirators received various sentences, some exiled, some imprisoned, a few executed for particularly egregious violence during the coup. Justice was done, if not perfectly administered. That evening, James found Samuel on the terrace overlooking the city. The old vampire was smoking a cigar that smelled expensive, and probably was given he'd had 300 years to develop taste for the finer things. You spoke well at the trial, Samuel said without preamble. Spoke from experience. I've seen what happens when you choose vengeance over wisdom.
We
It
must
just creates
protect the
more
innocent
problems.
at all costs.
Most humans wouldn't see it that way. Most humans haven't commanded soldiers, haven't had to balance justice with pragmatism, punishment with rehabilitation. James accepted the cigar Samuel offered. You saved my life at the tunnels at the safe house by teaching me to fight. Thank you. You'd have done the same. Would I have known you 3 weeks? Why risk yourself for a human you barely know? Samuel considered his answer while night settled over Nighthaven. Because I owed Catherine a debt 300 years haven't repaid. She died protecting me when I was 16. Threw herself between me and assassins who wanted our bloodline ended. I've spent every day since trying to honor her sacrifice by being worthy of it. And helping me helps how? Because Claire is doing what Catherine did. Choosing to protect someone who isn't her species isn't her responsibility, who might not even survive long enough to make the sacrifice worth it. Samuel's voice roughened. If I can help her survive, if I can teach James to
We must
protect her,
protect the
that's
innocent at
honoring
all
Catherine's
costs.
memory better than any monument. They stood in comfortable silence, two warriors from different centuries, finding common ground and shared purpose. James's shoulders still ached where Silver had cut deep reminder that he was human in a world designed to eat humans alive. But he was alive, Claire was safe, and Lily slept peacefully in the nursery under guard by people who die before letting harm come near. A week passed in recovery and rebuilding. The palace repaired damage from the coup guards, redistributed to account for conspirators removed from service nobles, carefully reassessing their positions now that taking sides had visible consequences. Claire trained daily with Samuel, learning to control the power that had manifested during crisis, understanding that magic without discipline was just danger waiting to happen. James trained too slower because injuries took time to heal at 56, but persistent because giving up meant failing in his primary mission. Samuel pushed him hard, teaching techniques for fighting opponents faster and stronger strategies that worked when direct confrontation meant death.
We must
On day
protect the
21,
innocent
since
at all
arriving in
costs.
Nighthaven, 3 weeks that felt like years, Samuel pulled James aside after training. They walked to a part of the palace library James hadn't explored, shelves packed with texts so old they should have crumbled to dust. I found something about the prophecy. Samuel pulled down a scroll wrapped in protective cloth. It's not complete. The version everyone quotes about protectors dying young is only half the text. James felt his heart rate spike. What's the other half? Let me translate. The original is in a language dead before English existed. Samuel unrolled the scroll carefully, his ancient eyes scanning text that looked more like art than writing. The bound shall walk the path of sacrifice. This is what we know. But it continues, unless the bound is bound by love's own choice, then death shall hold no final voice. What does that mean? It means protectors who bonded from duty, from obligation, from anything except genuine love. They died young because the bond consumed them without giving back. But protectors who bonded from love, who chose their charge freely and completely, the records are unclear about their fates. Some suggest they lived full lives. Others that they transcended the prophecy entirely. James stared at the scroll, at words that offered hope instead of certainty. So Claire might not die at 33. Claire chose Lily from love, from compassion, that had nothing to do with duty or politics. If this text is accurate, and I believe it is, then she's not bound by the prophecy the same way historical protectors were. But I can't guarantee anything. History's unclear because protectors who bonded from love were rare. Most were assigned, forced, obligated by circumstances. Claire chose freely. That might change everything. James sat heavily on a library chair that had probably seen centuries of readers. Why tell me this now? Because you needed hope. I've watched you these 3 weeks, seen how you carry the weight of Claire's probable death like a stone around your neck. You deserve to know the full truth, incomplete as it is. Thank you. Don't thank me yet.
We must
Wait
protect
until
the innocent
Claire's
at all
50
costs.
and still breathing. That night, Marcus found James in his quarters while Claire was putting Lily down for sleep. The Vampire King carried a sealed bottle and 2 glasses, settling into a chair. Without invitation, because they'd moved past formalities into something closer to friendship. I want to offer you something. Marcus poured amber liquid that probably cost more than James's truck. The chance to extend your life. Vampire blood carefully administered over time can grant humans longevity. Not immortality, but 2, maybe 300 years. You'd age slower, heal faster, maintain physical capability well past normal human limits. James took the offered glass. Why offer this? Because Lily needs a grandfather, Claire needs a father, and I need someone I can trust completely. Marcus met his eyes. I'm 812 years old. I've had many allies, countless servants, armies of guards. But friends, people I trust with my daughter's life, my own life, the future of my kingdom. That list is very short. I'm honored, truly,
We
but
must
I need time
protect
to
the
think
innocent
about it.
at all
We'll
costs.
take all the time you need. The offer doesn't expire. After Marcus left, James stood on his balcony, watching Nighthaven glow with its perpetual crimson light. 200 years. He could watch Claire live a full life, see Lily grow up, maybe even meet great-grandchildren Claire might have someday. He could serve longer, longer delay the inevitable obsolescence that had driven him here in the first place. But he'd also lose what made him James Mitchell. The mortality that forced meaning, the limited time that made choices matter, the understanding that life was precious because it ended. 300 years sounded like immortality to someone who'd lived 56, and immortality sounded like losing the urgency that had defined his entire existence. He made his decision, watching sunrise attempt to penetrate Shadow Valley's perpetual gloom. The next day, he found Marcus in the throne room. I appreciate the offer, more than you know, but my answer is no. May I ask why? Because I'm human, that's not a weakness to overcome, it's what makes me useful. I think differently than vampires because I process time
We
differently.
must protect the innocent
50 years
at all
to you
costs.
is a blink. To me, it's most of a lifetime. That difference matters. James continued, I've got maybe 20, 30 good years left. Maybe less, given how soldiers age. But those years will matter because they're finite. Every decision counts when you can't just wait a century for consequences to fade. That's the gift of mortality, it forces meaning. Marcus studied him with something like respect. You'd choose death over longevity. I'd choose being fully human over being something in between. Not because vampires are wrong, but because this is who I am, James Mitchell. Former soldier Claire's father, man, who's lived 56 years and learned that quality beats quantity every time. You're certain, never been more certain of anything. Then I respect your choice, even though I wish you'd chosen differently. 6 months later, Nighthaven held the formal ceremony recognizing Claire as Lily's official protector with full royal authority. James stood beside his daughter wearing formal clothes that felt uncomfortable, but looked appropriate, watching as Marcus addressed assembled nobles from across the territory. Let it be known throughout Shadow Valley that Claire Bennett is hereby recognized as protector to Princess Lily, heir to the throne. She is granted full authority to act in the princess's best interests with the backing of the crown and blessing of the council. Applause followed genuine this time without the undercurrent of hostility that had marked their arrival. The coup's failure had proven Claire's value, her magic's power, and her commitment to Lily's safety. Opposition hadn't vanished, but it had gone quiet, cautious, waiting to see if this human would truly survive or just prove Victoria's warnings right through delayed failure. After the ceremony, Claire found James on their usual terrace spot. Lily played on a blanket between them, now 1 year old, and starting to walk with vampire-enhanced coordination that made every step seem like she might float away. You really turned down Marcus's offer, the life extension. I really did. Why, you could have centuries. I could watch you grow old while I stayed young. Watch Lily become an adult while her grandfather looked 30. That's not natural,
We
kiddo.
must protect the
That's not
innocent
who
at
I
all
am.
costs.
Claire was quiet for a moment. How much time do we have? I'm 57 now. Good health, decent shape for my age. Samuel says, if I keep training and don't do anything stupid, maybe 20 years. Maybe more if I'm lucky. That's not enough. It's what we've got, so we make it count. James pulled her close the way he had when she was 5 months old and new to his life. I'd trade 50 empty years for 5 meaningful ones. These last 6 months, they've mattered more than most of my life combined. I love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. 5 years later, James Mitchell was 62 years old and felt every single day of it. His joints ached in cold weather, his shoulders still twinged, where silver had cut deep and getting out of bed took longer than he preferred to admit. But he was alive, functional, still training with Samuel 3 mornings a week, even if the sessions were gentle. Lily was 6 years old and starting formal education with tutors who specialized in teaching vampire royalty. She called James Grandpa
We
and
must
Claire
protect
Mama
the innocent
without
at all
any confusion
costs.
about which relationships were blood and which were choice. Smart as a whip in developing powers that made even elder vampires nervous. Not dangerous, but unprecedented, combining human compassion with vampire strength in ways the kingdom hadn't seen in centuries. Claire was 28, healthy despite prophecies that said she should be dead by now. The silver marks had spread up her entire arm, beautiful script that glowed faintly when Lily was near. Her powers had grown 2 barriers strong enough to stop armies truth-seeing that made lying impossible in her presence, instincts that predicted danger hours before it arrived. Samuel's discovery had been right. Protectors who bonded from love lived differently than those bound by duty. No one knew how long Claire would live, but 5 years was longer than historical precedent suggested, and she showed no signs of the deterioration that had marked earlier protectors. Evening found them all in the nursery, though calling it that was silly now that Lily was 6. James sat in the worn chair that had become his default spot, watching Claire and Lily work
We
through
must
reading
protect
lessons.
the innocent at all
Marcus
costs.
appeared in the doorway home from council meetings that had run late. The tableau was so domestic, so normal, despite everything supernatural about their circumstances, that James felt his chest tighten with something beyond words. This was family. Not the one he'd been born into or the one he'd planned, but the one he'd chosen and been chosen by in return. Grandpa, Lily bounced over with the book she'd been reading. Listen to this part. She read with impressive fluency, for 6 stumbling over a few words, but self-correcting with determination that came from her father. When she finished the passage, she looked at James with amber eyes that saw more than they should. "Are you okay? You look sad." "Not sad, sweetheart, just thinking about how lucky I am." "Why?" "Because I got to meet you, got to be here for this." He gestured at the room that Claire and Mark was smiling at the life they built together. Some people spend their whole lives looking for purpose. I found mine when I was 56 years old. "That's really old. Tell me about it." Marcus joined them, settling on the floor beside Lily with ease that would have been impossible for a human his apparent age. "James, I've been meaning to ask, do you have regrets about coming here, about everything that's happened? Regrets about getting shot at, stabbed with silver and nearly killed multiple times?" "Yeah, I've got those," James smiled. "Regrets about coming, about staying, not even a little. Even knowing you might have had different life, quieter retirement, less danger. I had that life for 2 years. It was hollow. Though," he looked at Lily, reading at Claire, teaching at Marcus, being the father he thought he'd lost when Evelyn died. "This matters. I wake up every day knowing I matter. That's worth every scar, every ache, every morning I can barely walk until the coffee kicks in." Later, after Lily was asleep and Claire had retreated to her quarters, James stood on the terrace watching Nighthaven glow against mountain darkness. 5 years. He'd been here 5 years, long enough that the city felt like home, long enough that vampires nodded to him in hallways, long enough that he couldn't quite remember
We must
what life
protect the
before this
innocent
had
at
felt
all
like.
costs.
Marcus joined him with their usual drinks. "I meant what I said earlier about offering the life extension. The offer still stands if you change your mind." "I haven't changed my mind, but I appreciate you asking. You're 62. That's getting close to average human life expectancy." "I'm aware, but I've lived well, fully, no complaints." They stood in silence that didn't need filling, two men from different species who'd found unlikely friendship through shared purpose. James thought about the empty cabin in Montana, about retirement that had felt like death, about the hollow years before a baby vampire bit his daughter's sleeve and changed everything. "You know what I've learned," James finally spoke. "It's not about how long you live. It's about what you do with the time you've got." Catherine lived 33 years and left a legacy that's lasted 3 centuries. Margaret made it to 62, and people still tell her stories. I've got maybe 10, maybe 20 years left, if I'm lucky. But every single day matters because I'm choosing to make it matter.
We must
Marcus's
protect
voice
the
held
innocent
quiet
at all
respect.
costs.
"You're a rare man, James Mitchell. I'm a soldier who found his last mission, the one I was always supposed to find." He looked at Marcus directly. "Thank you for letting me be here, for trusting me with your daughter, for becoming something more than just an ally. Thank you for showing me that species doesn't define family, that choosing someone matters more than blood." Marcus raised his glass. "To friendship across impossible divides. To finding purpose when you'd given up on it." They drank while Nighthaven glowed below a city of vampires that had become home to one aging soldier who'd learned that the best battles weren't about winning, but about who you protected while fighting them. James had spent 30 years of his life preparing to protect things that mattered. He'd spent the last 5 actually doing it. That was enough. That was everything. Inside, Lily stirred in her sleep, and Claire automatically moved closer, the bond between them so natural now that neither thought about it
We must
consciously.
protect the innocent at
Marcus
all
headed
costs.
to check on them, leaving James alone with stars and mountains, and the understanding that his time was finite, but had been spent well. He thought about Victoria, exiled but alive, hopefully finding peace in whatever distant territory she'd landed. Thought about the 43 conspirators who'd learned that fear made people stupid. Thought about Samuel still training guards at 300 years old, still carrying Catherine's memory like a torch that wouldn't go out. Thought about Claire, 28, and thriving, defying prophecies through love instead of duty. About Lily, 6 years old with a future nobody could predict, but everyone hoped for. About Marcus, 800 years old, and finally understanding that family wasn't about bloodlines, but choices, and thought about himself. James Mitchell, 56 when this started, 62 now, maybe 80, if fortune smiled. Former soldier who'd found the mission he'd been training for his entire life without knowing it. Father who'd raised a daughter that wasn't his by blood, but was entirely his by choice. Friend of vampires who probably shouldn't trust humans but did anyway.
We must protect the
His life
innocent
had
at
meaning.
all costs.
His days mattered. When death finally came, and it would come probably sooner than people who lived centuries understood, he'd die, knowing he'd spent himself on something worth the cost. That was what soldiers did. They fought for things that mattered. And nothing mattered more than family blood, or chosen human, or vampire connected by obligation or love. James Mitchell had found his family in the last place he'd expected, and he'd protect them with everything he had for as long as breath remained. That was enough. That was everything. That was exactly what it meant to be a warrior who'd finally found his war worth fighting.